Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 19th, 2019 meeting of the Lake Forest City Council. Let the record reflect that all council members are present. And we will start with the invocation from Chaplain Jeff Hetzel of Orange County Fire Authority.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, City Council, if you'd allow me to pray for us. Father, thank you for this great night. Thank you that plans are talked about, very exciting times. We need your wisdom. Lead these people as they make the best decision that leaves the city of Lake Forest even better, the crown jewel of Orange County. We thank you so much for this city and the role it plays as an example to the rest of our county. We thank you for tonight, for a peaceful night for our sheriff's deputies and for OCFA. It's in your powerful name I thank you. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Robinson.
If you'll join me in standing. And tonight we'll recite the pledge that most of us have done countless times. We'll pledge our allegiance to the flag and to the republic. As we recite the pledge, let us be reminded of the men and women who've sacrificed themselves so we can live as freely as we do today. And let us remind ourselves that in spite of our numerous political, ideological, and philosophical differences, we're one nation. We're united in our dedication to our country and to making it better. So please join me in reciting the pledge. Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next we have a report from our student liaison from El Toro High School. Tonight it is Jacob Walker.
Here's an extra copy in case you need it.
Hi there, thank you.
Good evening.
The SVUSD District-Wide Philanthropy Project is underway, beginning March 18th and continuing through the 22nd. This is a week-long coin drive benefiting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. The coin drive will be in effect at all SVUSD district campuses. El Toro's What If Week is currently taking place from March 18th to March 22nd as well. There will be a new theme each day. Monday being What If We Kick Off Together. Today being What If We Compete Together, where we hold competitions at Snack. Wednesday being What If We Eat Together, where we will have an ice cream truck at Snack. Thursday being What If We Sing Together, where we will record our lip dub. And Friday being What If We Dance Together, where El Toro will be holding a gym dance free to all seniors. Our goal with What If Week is to raise questions in students' minds about how we treat each other at school and beyond, and what we can do to improve that. The ETHS Winter Guard will be hosting 55 schools all over Southern California for the first WGASC Winter Guard competition. We need as much help as possible, so if you would like to volunteer, please contact Winnie Cruz at wincruz485@gmail.com. Our Wellness Wednesdays will be continuing March 27th in our auxiliary gym, with a theme of mindful meditation. We are honored to announce that Mr. Peter Proud from South Coast Photography will be our principal for a day on Friday, March 22nd. Mr. Proud will be touring the campus, meeting students, and shadowing our principal. That's all I have for you. Thank you for your time, and as always, go Chargers.
Go Chargers. Thank you, Mr. Walker. All right, next on the agenda, a closed session report.
No action report tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Next, we have two presentation items. I would seek a motion.
I'll move the presentations.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote on that.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So the first presentation is an introduction to a new chief of police.
Yes, Mayor and members of the City Council, it is my pleasure to introduce Lieutenant Chad Taylor, who was selected as our Chief of Police Services. Lieutenant Taylor is a 22-year veteran of the Orange County Sheriff's Department. Prior to his selection, he served as the watch commander at the Santa Ana Intake Center. As we were reviewing candidates, one of the things that stood out to me about Chad was that he was a deputy here in Lake Forest for 5 years. So if you were in need of law enforcement during that 5-year period, you may have run across Lieutenant Taylor, but he comes highly recommended, and I'm so pleased to have him with us. And so please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Chad Taylor as our Chief of Police Services.
Would we look for comments at this point from him?
And at this point, I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Taylor for some comments.
Well, first off, I'd like just to thank everybody for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to working with the team that you've assembled, as well as the citizens of Lake Forest. So my door is always open. Only my second day, so I'm kind of getting my feet wet. So as I start to get a little bit of speed, just bear with me. So thank you guys again.
Welcome aboard. Welcome back. Thank you. Next, we have the recognition. So I think the city manager was going to introduce this, and I will head to the podium.
Yes, we have a recognition of Nowruz, I believe I'm saying that correctly, the Persian New Year. So I'd like to ask Dr. Gilak, the Secretary of the Orange County Council of Farhang Foundation, to join us at the podium. And Nowruz means a new day, and it's a traditional New Year's celebration for the Persian community worldwide. And it always coincides with the first day of spring. And Nowruz promotes the values of peace and solidarity between generations and within families, as well as reconciliation and neighborliness. And so Nowruz will be celebrated on Thursday, March 21st. And so we had this opportunity to have this recognition just a few days in advance of the celebration.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. Did you want to say a few words?
Sure. I mean,
Yeah.
if you
No, go ahead.
to introduce Farhang Foundation, I think it would be good for the council. Thank you, first of all, for having me, and Happy Nowruz and Happy Spring to everybody. I just wanted to introduce the foundation because we established this foundation about 10 years ago in LA and about 7 years ago in Orange County. And we collaborate with museums and universities, and our mission is to promote Iranian arts and culture, a community at large. And the main point that I was going to talk about is the after-school program we have. And we teach Persian or Farsi languages to the students free of charge. So if there is any interest in City of Lake Forest, we would like to be in touch with the school about that. And we self-fund the program, so there's not going to be any cost for the parents or the school, although the schools can charge the students. And we do a lot of other activities as well. I believe I gave the program books to you guys, so if you want to look, and the description of Nowruz, which is pretty interesting. But thank you for having Nowruz, which is a 3,000-year-old tradition, with us in the United States, in our guest country, or our new home country. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. So we have a certificate of recognition signed by each of the council members, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Let's do a quick picture here.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, hold that up. There we go. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, next is public comments. As a reminder, if you would like to participate, please fill out a blue speaker card, turn it into the city clerk, and your name will be called. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. When you are called to speak, you will see 3 lights at the podium. The first is green. That's when you can begin. When you have 30 seconds left, the light will turn yellow, and when your time has expired, the light will turn red. At the time your public comment period is ended, the council requests that you conclude your comments. Madam Clerk, anybody wish to speak?
We've received 1 speaker card, Mr. Bob Holtzclaw.
Hello, Bob Holtzclaw, resident of Lake Forest. Just a few things I just wanted to comment on. I got this, picked it up about the agenda and everything else, and it says roll call at 6 p.m. Does that mean the regular meeting is supposed to start at 6? If it is, if you want to start at 6:30, it's no big deal. I mean, just roll it back and vote on it, because it's half hour isn't. I know some of you maybe have a hard time getting to, here at 6 o'clock. No problem. Just roll it back. Another thing is the sports park for the Dog Expo. Evidently, it was a huge success. The only thing is that a lot of people were complaining about parking because they also had the some games and everything else during the same time. This was discussed a while back to try to maneuver this so there'd be room enough for everybody to park, because that's a big draw, the sport, the Dog Expo. And if we could limit it to just that and maybe kind of move some of the sports games to different times, I think a lot of residents would be a lot more happier. Last I have is the street sweeping. Now, we haven't really voted on this every other week situation, and we should. A lot of residents were in favor of the every other week, especially during the summer and spring. A street sweeper doesn't need to sweep every week. During the winter, when you get all this rain and debris, and the spring when you get, or fall when you get a lot of leaves, okay, yeah, maybe every day or every week. But we should vote on it. And I know some members, they've get some donations for, from Athens, but you represent the residents of Lake Forest, and I think we should have a vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You want to say something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Real quick, City Manager, can you kind of address some of the Pet Expo Sports Park? We discussed it. Maybe you could share with the audience kind of some ideas for what some of the issues were and what we're going to do better next year.
Mayor and members of the council, as the Pet Expo was developed, the initial thought was that they weren't sure how big a draw it was. So in the first couple of years, they wanted to program it at the same time as sports because they felt that they would draw people who were there for Little League games or other activities into their event. And then the second and third year, I believe it rained, and so the parking was not an issue. This year we had really good weather, a popular author who just had a film out, and so we had a very successful event, and we believe the event is big enough now that it could stand on its own. And so I think in future years the committee is going to discuss whether they're going to just exclusively have that event at the sports park and not have any other competing events going. So we definitely did hear that feedback. Also at the event, we anticipated having 30 volunteers that were going to help with signage for directing people to the alternate parking that had been set up, because we did anticipate we would have overflow parking. Unfortunately, those volunteers weren't able to join us that day, so there was a scramble, and we weren't able to put signage as well as we would hope to address that. So people really were kind of, once they didn't find a parking space, didn't really know where to go, that we had anticipated and had the lot across the street at Saddleback Church. So some people still went to our event, which we're thankful for, but they had to walk quite a distance. And so we realized that was something that we really couldn't control. But we definitely got that feedback, and so we will build on that for next year's event.
Thank you.
And just briefly, could you also address the time issue just so that all residents understand when the meetings start and how that's all labeled on the agenda?
Sure. The agenda, the call to order for 6 p.m. is for the closed session, and so that's to signal to the public that there is a meeting starting, and that is when we do take account of which council members are present. And then if you flip to the second side of the agenda, it does say public session 6:30. Now, I realize that not everyone is a government nerd like I am and would know how to read an agenda like that, and so, but that is the way that it is labeled, that public session starts at 6:30, but the roll call of council members present to do the community's work does start at 6 o'clock.
Would it be possible to put the public session part also on the front page, because that's what a lot of people are going to look at?
Yeah, I believe so. We could certainly do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, anybody else? Blue speaker cards.
I have not received any other speaker cards.
Okay. Please.
We have one, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Martin Henderson, comment for council. At the last council meeting, I asked the question of Mayor Mark Tedimer and each member of the Lake Forest City Council. It was a simple yes-no question, and yet only one council member, Leah Basil, bothered to respond to the question. Do you think city council members should be held accountable for their words and actions? Basil said yes. By their silence, everyone else answered no. If you're a resident of Lake Forest, you have to ask yourself why your elected officials would refuse to answer such a simple question that speaks to the character, integrity, transparency, and responsibility. It's because they can't withstand the scrutiny of their words and actions. The last election was campaigned on the premise that Jim Gardner was divisive, when in fact Gardner has been calling out elected officials for years in an attempt to hold council members accountable. Council members didn't like their weaknesses exposed to the public. Life is much easier when your dirt can be swept under the rug. In 2017, I asked a different council a similar question: do you condone lying? Scott Voights refused to answer. Why would Voights refuse to answer a question about lying? Because he can't withstand the scrutiny. Councilman Voights is a liar, and he has lied repeatedly to the people of this city. Councilman Voights doesn't want to be held accountable for his words and actions. That's typical of people who are not true leaders. Why would Councilwoman Montezzetti not answer the question about accountability? It's because her campaign was built on lies. I've seen the emails, so I know that she fabricated the narrative about Sonny Morpher in this election, lies that she told millions of television viewers at a news conference she called. She lied to the cameras, she lied to the residents. Before that, she lied about Tom Cagley. She lied about her qualifications, she lied about her accomplishments. Did she ever try to correct the record when an independent committee said she was working to improve traffic as a member on an oversight committee that didn't exist? Never. She lied. Why would Mayor Tettemer not answer the question about accountability? It's because he lied to the residents to get their vote. He said the council was dysfunctional, divisive, and that politics had taken over the council, none of which were true since the recall of Andrew Hamilton. Tettemer said important issues were on the back burner because of political gamesmanship, but he's never identified those issues, nor has he brought those issues before the council. He lied. Mayor Tettemer refuses to even respond to questions about the stench emanating from a recycling plant that is diminishing the quality of life of residents, even though he works for the agency responsible for the stench and is uniquely qualified to address it. But Mayor Tettemer sits silent. He told residents, if you have a question, just ask Mark, but Mark Tettemer doesn't respond. Why is that? It's because he doesn't want to be held accountable for his words and actions. When elected leaders don't want to be held accountable, they've got their reasons. It should make us all question their motives.
Okay, anything else from Facebook Live?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sean Fletcher, comment for council. It's easy for some to speak against his or her adversaries when they are in the wrong, but it takes a true leader to speak against his or her friends and supporters when they are in the wrong. Since the last election cycle and through the time of the sitting of the current council, we have been inundated with wild accusations and conspiracy theories and racist comments, opinions presented as facts, and outright bullying by a group of individuals who support Council Member Basil. Yet, through this time, Member Basil has been silent. Is it because she is afraid of being the next target? We expect our leaders to be stronger than that. Is it because she silently condones her supporters' behavior? I would hope not. I am calling on Council Member Basil to demonstrate true leadership and denounce the thuggery these select supporters portray. That is all.
Great, thank you. So we will conclude public comment. Brings us to the consent calendar, items 4 through 9. Has anybody from the public asked to poll?
I have not received any requests.
Hey, colleagues?
I'd like to move 4 through 9.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Before we proceed, I need to make a couple of declarations. Thank you, legal counsel. On the item, on the warrant register is an item for Irvine Ranch Water District. I am an employee of Irvine Ranch Water District, but I do not work for the department that generated the warrant. Because Irvine Ranch Water District is a public agency and because I do not work for the department in question, I have determined that I have a non-interest in the warrant and will vote on the warrant. Furthermore, there is a warrant on the register to Irvine Ranch Water District entitled Bake Toledo City Contribution. Because I'm an employee for the department that generated this warrant and because Irvine Ranch Water District is a public agency, I've determined that I have a remote interest in this matter and I will not vote on that item. Does that take care of that, Mr. City Attorney? Great, thank you. Okay, anything else, colleagues? Otherwise, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion approved unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to
On that line item.
first discussion item, the Civic Center Construction Quarterly Report.
Mayor and members of the council, we have a report by our Assistant City Manager, Keith Needs.
Mayors and members of the City Council, we have a report. We do a quarterly report every quarter on the progress of the Civic Center project. Tonight, John Erickson, project manager for Bernard's, will come up and go through a short PowerPoint presentation. And then after John, we will get Greg Powers from Red Brick Consulting. He's our owner representative to come up and answer any questions that the council may have regarding the Civic Center projects. Right now, I'll bring John Erickson up from Bernard's, and he'll go through a short PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, members of the council. I'm John Erickson, your project manager with Bernard's, the construction manager for the city. Pleased to give you an update on the project construction. We've made a lot of progress. We've had a lot of rain also, the impacts, so I'll go ahead and discuss that here in the next couple slides. To give a overview of the total project, our rough grading project has been completed January of 2018. Parking garage is completed of April 2018. The street improvement project, which is actually going to notice completion tonight, is completed with a handful of punch list items remaining. The remaining cap and all the landscape portion, I believe, is getting bid out this week and will be completed here towards the end of the summer. The habitat restoration hillside planning, that's ongoing and currently projected to be completed in May of 2019, the next couple of months. And then the Civic Center campus completing in the fall of 2019. To give an update of everything, here's a photo of the current city road right now. We're currently also using it for staging. As I just mentioned earlier, we'll be doing the cap sheet on there and later in the summer, as well as all the landscaping of the roundabout and the right-of-ways. Moving into the Civic Center. Right here is sort of a high-level schedule of the project. You can see we're in the building exteriors, the building interiors, specifically all our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. We're just rolling into all our drywall for starting on council and admin building here the next couple weeks, and then you'll start seeing finishes coming in real shortly. And then the site work is just beginning as well. Specifically on each building, here's a photo of the Performing Arts Center. This was taken yesterday. You'll see that we're making a lot of progress on the exterior of the building. This is all the enclosure, all your insulation. This is everything that you're looking at to dry in the building. We've completed all the roofs on the building as well. That just finished last week. And then on the interiors, we're all framed out, roughed in. We're going through our final rough-in inspections, and we're going to be starting drywall here probably in the next week or so. Admin building is just a hair behind the Performing Arts Center. It was our second building in the sequence of buildings. You could see we're on the exterior of the enclosure system. On the back side of the building, what you don't see looks a lot closer to what the council chambers looks like. You'll see all the insulation, all the Tyvek, which is our dry-in materials, and then all our Durock is going on as well for the stone. We're expecting to have the stone started later this week, so we'll start seeing some finishes on the exterior of this building. On the senior center is our building number 3. It's tailing the finishes of the exterior of the admin building. You can see the crews have already made their way around for the Densbass of the building. This is our first layer of skin. Once the Tyvek, which is sort of the white layer that you see out there, comes completion on the admin building, they'll follow into the senior center and into community. You can see on the senior center as well, the roofing, the dry-in portion is complete, but the sanding seam portion, which is your finish protection layer, is going to be starting here the next week or so. And then the community center, which is our fourth and last building in the project, we're in our framing stage. We finished all our steel from the last building. We start roofing this week, and we've started all our MEPs in the interior just in the past week and a half or so. And lastly is our site work. So we have started our site work on the project. This photo here is of the senior center patios. So you can start seeing the stone going on. This is probably our first layer of finishes for the project. Unfortunately, we're not as far along as we'd like to be on the the site work or some of the locations on the campus because we have hit rain. Since our last meeting, I believe it was actually raining during the meeting. Our last quarterly update, we've had 21 days of rain impact to the project. We had built in 15 days of rain into the schedule, so we've exhausted those 15 days, and we've had a 6-day impact sort of hitting the schedule. But we're still projected to hit our first meeting in November council meeting. So that's kind of the update of the ongoing construction. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Greg Powers.
Good evening, Council. I'm just here to answer any questions that you may have right now. John's pretty much communicated everything that we have that's ongoing. Currently, the project, I think, is doing very well. We've been able to keep most people headed the same direction at the same time, and decisions are being made, risks are being evaluated and addressed and mitigated, and financially, we're not having any concerns. We don't have any schedule concerns, and we don't have any finish concerns. Right now, everything is looking, all lanes are go. Everything is looking green right now.
Colleagues? Yeah.
I understand because of the rain delays, obviously that changes your schedule a bit unless you had some contingency there, but does that affect some of the costs? Are you having crews there still?
So the way the project is structured, the contractors have an obligation to deal with weather as part of their scope of work, their weather. So yes, we have some costs that have been related to the extenuated weather conditions that we've had to deal with, but we have allowances and budgets for those. So in our allowance package, the way it was done with all the bids, there was about $1.3 million worth of allowances that we have. Currently today, we're only at 30% consumption of our allowances. So in the project of this nature, with all the chaos that we have that goes in with the different finishes and things, those allowances are not intended to be money that is as contingency. Those are actually allowances. So those monies are intended to be spent in the course of construction. They're part of the budget. But we've been able to successfully do some value engineering, and we've been able to keep everybody focused pretty tight and protect things in a way that we haven't had a lot of risk. So, yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you just have surgery?
Yeah, I did.
What are you doing here?
You know what? This is a really important project.
We appreciate your dedication, but I'm going to be the mom here. Take care of yourself.
I appreciate that very much.
Civic Center will hold up on its own. You take care of yourself.
Well, these guys have to be watched. They're actually, you guys have a really unique team here with the way the design architect and how they're investing in the project and focused on it, with Bernard's and with the management team that you guys have in place. This is really, I definitely don't want to jinx it, but we almost have it's almost like a dream project the way it's coming together. We have problems. I mean, we've had problems with our chairs. We had problems with structural steel. We've had true construction issues that are significant on the project, but they've all been resolved, and everybody's been focused on resolution and moving forward as opposed to trying to protect their positions. And so we've got a great team.
I agree with you.
I think that really allows us to be able to be a very easy discussion.
Well, I agree with you. I think we definitely have a great team.
Yeah.
Keith watches this baby and makes sure it's doing well. But it's nice to know that we have such a dedicated owner's rep.
Well, thank you.
That you
Appreciate
take care
that.
of yourself.
And I saw you guys were up on the roof, and I was sitting in the trailer. I would have loved to come out and see you guys. So.
Well,
yeah, that's why I got my jacket on.
We were on the parking deck, not a roof of a
parking
building.
deck.
Yeah, no,
exactly. Would love to be able to introduce you guys to how complex the building is someday. So, if you guys get a chance, we'd love to walk you through it, and so you guys can get a sense of really how much stuff goes into a building like this before the walls get closed in or before the ceilings get on. So you can really appreciate what the work that's going on with the team.
Great.
Okay,
colleagues, anything else? No?
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you very much.
Thank you. And just to make sure, is there any public comment?
I have not received any cards.
Okay, anything from Facebook?
No, sir.
Okay. And this is essentially a receive and file. Do you need just an update? Okay. That brings us to item number 11, which is the general plan land use themes.
Mayor and members of the council, we have a presentation by our Director of Community Development, Gail Ackerman.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and members of the council. The city's been working with De Novo Planning Group for the past 14 months on the update to the city's general plan. Tonight, Amanda Tropiano and Ben Ritchie are here to lead the council in the discussion on land use themes. So I'd like to introduce Amanda Tropiano.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Thank you for having us here tonight to talk about a very exciting part of our general plan update project. So as Gail had mentioned, my name's Amanda Tropiano. I'm a principal planner and project manager with De Novo Planning Group working with you on this effort. I also have Ben Ritchie here with me today, a principal and owner of De Novo Planning Group. So I'm going to give a presentation summarizing the land use themes report. Then we are going to have an opportunity for public comment, and then we're going to help facilitate a discussion with council on the focus areas presented in the report. So that's the order of operations for tonight. So the intent of the result of your action tonight is to provide us direction regarding your preference for the future of each of the 5 focus areas we're going to discuss throughout the city. So this is meant to be a conversation and discussion. A lot of thought and work has gone into presenting some of these ideas for your consideration, but we fully expect and want a discussion amongst the council to help us arrive at a preference for each of these 5 focus areas. So that is the direction we're asking for you to provide the consultant team and staff this evening. The general plan update process in Lake Forest is organized around 3 phases. The first phase is to envision the future of Lake Forest. That phase was largely complete and summarized the results of that effort to you at your January briefing. We're currently in the middle of the second of 3 phases, really thinking about the land use future of Lake Forest and evaluating the alternative scenarios that were discussed in the land use themes report. The final phase is really to help craft the general plan policy document and then really evaluate the impacts of the land use decisions and policy decisions you're making through an environmental impact report. So the entire project, the policy document, including any land use ideas, along with the environmental impact report, will be brought back to you for a public hearing process for your review and consideration. So tonight, as I had mentioned, I'm going to focus on kind of 2 different scales that the report evaluated land use ideas at. The first is the land use themes discussion, and I'll go through what those look like. And then the second component is really focused on the focus areas, and that's where we will be facilitating the discussion with you on those nuanced changes. So the purpose of the land use themes report is really to help provide you a tool with which to understand the opportunities and trade-offs associated with future changes in some of these focus areas. It doesn't advocate for any preference or recommendation. It's an analysis and tool for you to use to help facilitate that conversation. We're looking 20 years from now, so a lot of the tasks and objectives that you work on day to day are talking about the here and now. Just as a reminder, the general plan is looking about what Lake Forest could be 2 decades from now and in the future. So your children, your children's children, what is the future going to look like for them here in your community? So each of the 4 themes have been identified to help really create an overarching citywide framework for you to think about different scenarios or different emphasis of what the city might be over the long term. So again, there are 4 land use themes presented in the report. The first theme is referred to as Theme 1, your business as usual approach. You have a current adopted general plan land use map. It guides your land use decisions right now. So that plan and that idea is reflected in the Theme 1 business as usual approach. If you were to maintain your current land use map exactly as it is, that is what the Theme 1 response looks at. So it's not based on past annexations or development. It's looking at just what could occur right now under your current plan. So themes 2, 3, and 4 all start to take kind of a nuanced approach to how the city might focus its future development. And so the first of those is Theme 2, which really looks at saying, if you wanted to look at an opportunity to expand housing choices throughout the community, what might that look like if we applied that objective or that theme to each of our 5 focus areas? Theme 3 kind of takes a different approach where it says, what if we really wanted to expand the employment opportunities across all 5 of those theme focus areas? How would that theme apply to those areas? And then theme 4 looks at mixed growth, which is really saying we could have both housing and jobs growth at a proportion pretty similar to what we see in the community right now, just a little bit more accommodating to growth over the next 20 years. So just to clarify, while the emphasis of those themes all use words like expanded housing or expanded employment, both housing and employment growth are accommodated in each of the themes. So in the expanded housing choices theme, that's not precluding expanded employment choices as well. It's just where the emphasis of those themes lie. So in order to help craft these land use themes, we looked at developing land use objectives that we were hearing from the community as part of your visioning workshops, through the online vision and values survey, and through our general plan advisory committee meetings. So we developed a list of 8 guiding principles to help us craft what those land use themes would look like and how they'd apply to the focus areas. So the first objective was to preserve, protect, and enhance your existing residential neighborhoods. So you'll see that none of the 5 focus areas discussed tonight include any areas currently developed as residential. We were hearing from the community that those areas are the core fabric of what makes Lake Forest, and those should be preserved, protected, and enhanced, and really looking at opportunities for revitalization in areas outside of your current existing residential neighborhoods. The second theme is to support your local businesses and industries. So looking at ways to help your current major employers, your current businesses that are already here in Lake Forest, how to help them be more successful. Looking at ways to strengthen your image and identity. So these focus areas in many cases are located along your major corridors or transportation facilities. They really serve as the window or gateway into Lake Forest. So making sure that they reflect the positive image and identity that helps define Lake Forest from its neighbors. And then looking at accommodating this future growth, as I had mentioned, close to regional and major transportation facilities in order to limit potential impacts to your local infrastructure. We also were looking at allowing the opportunity for a mix of uses to come closer together so that people could have opportunities to live, work, and socialize in proximity to one another. Expanding the range of attainable housing choices in Lake Forest, so making sure that different people of different ages and incomes and jobs, workforce housing, people that are already working here, and many of your employers here in Lake Forest have an opportunity to live closer to their jobs if they'd prefer. Looking at expanding your local economy by planning for emerging technologies. So while our profession is planners, we definitely don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you exactly what Lake Forest is going to look like 20 years from now or what any city is going to look like 20 years from now, but what we can do is help create a land plan and policy guidance to help you respond quickly to changes in the marketplace and plan to accommodate any emerging industries or technologies. And then ultimately, bringing forward a balanced plan that is fiscally sustainable and will help the city maintain its fiscal security as it continues to grow. So as I had mentioned, these 4 themes have been applied to 5 focus areas. So I know we're doing a little math while we're all here together. That means there's kind of 20 different puzzle pieces that we're going to be talking about tonight. Those are those that were reflected and reported in the Land Use Themes report. We'll also be presenting alongside that focus area discussion feedback that we received from the General Plan Advisory Committee regarding the application of those themes to the focus areas. And in some cases, they have an additional consideration that they'd like for you to consider alongside those that were evaluated in the report. For ease of reference, we've called that Theme 5 when GPAC made a recommendation for an alternative scenario. So those 5 focus areas, again, we presented these as part of our briefing in January. The first is the El Toro Road Corridor, really working from El Toro at the 5 freeway up to just short of Muirlands. Looking at the Lake Forest Drive Corridor, Foothill Ranch Town Center, your new Civic Center area, but not including the Civic Center, so really just north of that facility, the experience that people would have if they were coming to visit your Civic Center area. And then the 5th focus area is the light industrial area adjacent to your rail corridor, also along El Toro. So tonight we're going to be talking about another term called the benchmark plan. And what we're really, what I want to convey is that the benchmark plan is going to be a citywide map that reflects Council's majority preference for each of those 5 focus areas. And that benchmark plan is what we're going to analyze in our environmental impact report. So we don't have all the nuanced answers to exactly, how many, what's the traffic impact at this particular intersection. We need a benchmark plan in order to conduct that technical analysis. So we're here to talk about those different scenarios, those different themes, arrive at this benchmark plan so that we can go and do all of that technical work, record that in an environmental impact report, and bring that back to you for your consideration. So we're fully expecting that this benchmark plan is going to reflect maybe your preferences for one theme in one certain focus area and a different theme in a different focus area. So you can imagine it kind of a Frankenstein of different ideas all coming together and being reflected in that benchmark plan. So your benchmark plan discussion tonight, I just want to be clear, we're not asking you to make final policy decisions. We're not asking you to update your land use map. Today is a discussion in order to get to that benchmark plan so that we can move forward with that analysis and come back to you with all of that technical discussion regarding impacts and solutions. So once that benchmark plan's prepared, we'll do that environmental review, and again, we'll be back to you with that EIR and the policy document for your review through a public hearing process. So as we start talking about the tools that we used in order to think about what the future of these focus areas looked like, one of the things that we need to do is look at how your land uses are defined. So these are the colors on your land use map, what they mean in terms of what types of uses can go where. Those are called your land use designations. So you have a number of land use designations right now that guide your current land use map. And generally speaking, your residential uses are defined by something called density, which is how many units fit within 1 acre of land. So that's reflected as your residential density. Non-residential uses, like your shopping centers or business parks, they're defined by a term called floor area ratio. That is how much square footage of a building, whether it's single story or 2 stories, how much of that fits within a given area. So that's reflected as your floor area ratio. The exhibits on the screen and will be available online kind of show you how those might look differently. So as residential units are laid out on a site, they could be far apart and have more traditional single-family fill with bigger yards and larger setbacks. Those are lower density. As you start to get units a little bit closer together or stacked on top of each other, your density goes up because you can fit more units in the same area. Same thing goes with floor area ratio. You could have a lot of different ways that buildings could be developed. If they're single story or they're multi-story, you could have the same amount of square footage in different configurations. So it's just important to remember that while density and floor area ratio, or FAR, are helpful terms when you think about what the future of development looks like, it's also really important to know that they can be built in different ways. So as projects are presented to you, the same density or the same FAR might look different. We've included the use of 5 new land use designations as a tool to think about the future of these focus areas. They include 3 new mixed use designations referred to as mixed use 25, mixed use 43, or mixed use 60. The number really refers to the maximum density that corresponds to each of those levels of development. We've also introduced a new urban residential designation that talks about a little bit more intense types of industrial uses, and then an urban industrial residential designation that takes those more urban uses and allows for residential as well. The intent is that mixed-use designations are reflected both as density and floor area ratio, and they can be all types of different types of mix of uses. So you can think about a mixed-use development having two complementary uses next to each other, so side by side. That can be referred to as horizontal mixed use, or you could have vertical mixed use where uses actually occur in a vertical configuration in the same building. Both of those would be envisioned as part of these new land use designations. And then as new projects are built, mixed use or otherwise, they're going to be required to adhere to all of the city's development standards, parking ratios. They need to maintain all of their adequate on-site parking and reflect all of the development standards that you require of your projects. They'll be back before staff and before you to make sure that they meet all of those objectives, implement the general plan, and meet the development standards. As part of the land use themes report, we've included some images to help kind of relate what these types of designations look like in projects you might see around Southern California. So we've got some great images included in that report and shown on the screen here, but really just to emphasize that as you start to bring some uses together, whether it's in horizontal or vertical configurations, you can get some really positive benefits in terms of the design and style that some of these projects look like. And the second page shows some of those non-residential examples, so the more vibrant, thriving job centers that the urban industrial use envisions, and then opportunities to really integrate residential in a positive, good neighborly way. All right, so we're going to now talk about how we've applied all of those different ideas to our themes, and if you were to say, let's go theme one, in all 5 of the focus areas, what would that look like? So the first theme, again, is really looking at your business as usual. So again, it's not based on past performance, it's based on what your current approved plan is. And it really reflects what you could expect if you just moved forward with your current plan as is and didn't make any changes to it. So your traditional plan looks at putting, houses in one spot, residential one spot, commercial development in another spot, and there's very limited opportunities for those types of uses to coexist next to each other. There is an existing mixed-use designation in your current general plan. It's applied in a very limited geographic area and not related to those core planning objectives that we discussed earlier. We would recommend that if you did move forward with Theme 1 in some or all of the areas, just as you're receiving case-by-case applications right now, to consider general plan amendments. If you were to continue in the business-as-usual scenario, you could expect to continue to receive those, just as you are today. So as development is looking at new opportunities in Lake Forest, they're bringing those to you for your consideration. Theme 2 looks at the expanded housing choices. So again, this is really looking at expanding your range and options of housing choices here, looking at the introduction of different types of development, so more condos or townhomes or apartments that could be more attainable for some of your workforce and for some people that would really like to call Lake Forest home, maybe as a first homeownership opportunity and are struggling to find a chance to do that right now. It also is an opportunity for your older residents as they want to grow and age in Lake Forest and stay close to their friends and family. If they'd like to have a smaller space and have less maintenance and responsibility, it could provide opportunities for them to downsize and still remain a vibrant part of your community. And looking at new housing and residents that really helps support your existing retail and shopping. So more people, more dollars to spend, more investment in your local jobs and shopping opportunities here in Lake Forest. Theme 3 looks at expanding your employment centers. So Lake Forest is extremely fortunate to have some wonderful major employers and industries here, and it continues to thrive, and you continue to place emphasis on the economic development of your community. So really envisioning it as a growing jobs and employment center, and looking at more intense commercial and industrial uses to help support some of those emerging industries. and looking at what would help those industries thrive, which would also be some attainable housing choices that could help support the lifestyle of workers looking to have jobs here in your community. And again, Theme 4 is mixed growth, looking at introducing both housing and employment choices at a ratio that generally reflects what you have today in your business as usual scenario, but just elevating that to allow for some future growth over the next 20 to 25 years. As part of this initial analysis, we have been able to look at some high-level impacts to mobility, fiscal impacts, and infrastructure. Those are recorded in the Land Use Themes report, and we've been able to generally evaluate what the application of those themes would look like across the city. Again, this is a starting point because we need to have that benchmark plan to bring back to you that really robust technical analysis that's going to hone in on all of those details. So this is really used, again, as a tool to help guide the discussion. But generally speaking, we did focus the areas of growth along your major transportation and mobility corridors, specifically to help reduce impacts on your local infrastructure. So locating them in areas where people can quickly get in and out of the community or get to job centers easily was one of the guiding principles of this project. The vast majority of your roadways operate at acceptable levels. We've detailed that as part of our existing conditions report when we actually went out and collected current technical information on your existing conditions. There are some limited areas that residents experience traffic from their perspective, but in general, your roadways are operating at sufficient capacity to accommodate future growth. The business as usual theme reflects the smallest number of increased trips compared to the other themes analyzed in the report. That's followed by theme 3, which really emphasizes employment, and then themes 2 and 4 are kind of tied at the end. With that said, they each have qualities that you need to consider as you think about those trade-offs, and again, we'll be analyzing it in detail as part of the environmental impact report. The benefits of mixed-use development not only result in sometimes more attractive or walkable projects, but it could help people make choices to get out of their car, be able to walk to goods and services more conveniently, and then that also helps reduce impacts to your local roadways. So there are discounts and methodology that come with the introduction of mixed uses that help alleviate some of those traffic congestion issues that you might anticipate. We've also conducted a preliminary fiscal impact analysis for each of the 4 areas, and those are summarized both in the Land Use Themes report and in detail as one of the appendices. And in general, they all have pretty consistent service level, service populations, meaning when you add up the number of residents and the number of employees, they're kind of consistent across the board. That's one of the reasons why when you look at the potential fiscal impacts, they all, for themes 2, 3, and 4, are within $300,000 of each other. And the result is that way because the service populations are pretty consistent. And just to be clear, all of the scenarios, all of the themes presented result in a positive net fiscal impact to the city. So none of the choices before you tonight would result in any sort of issue that would put the city at a disadvantage thinking about its fiscal future and fiscal sustainability. We'll be able to evaluate the benchmark plan again as part of that fiscal impact analysis to have alongside the policy document in the EIR. So we'll do this again for whatever that benchmark plan looks like. And then finally, we also have considered impacts to infrastructure. So you have a number of water agencies that serve the different focus areas analyzed in the report. They're at different stages of preparing their master plan and thinking about their long-term infrastructure needs. And as part of our environmental review process, we'll be coordinating those growth projections with those state, regional, and local agencies to ensure adequate capacity and that they're reflected in their long-term master plans as well. So tonight, we're really looking to have that discussion again to arrive at a benchmark plan, allow us to move forward with that environmental analysis so we can answer all of your specific questions. We'll move forward with drafting the policy document, and then again, all of that will be back before you as part of the public hearing process. So that's going to be the end of my part of the presentation. We're going to have public comment, and then Ben and I will be back up here to help facilitate the focus area discussion.
Thank you very much.
We have received 3 public speaker cards. The first is Will Geyer, followed by Alexa Washburn.
Hello, Council. My name is Will Geyer, and I'm speaking on behalf of Malone Geyer Partners. Malone Geyer is an owner and operator of retail and retail-driven mixed-use properties across the West Coast. We own 3 projects within the city of Lake Forest, and we also house one of our regional offices here. One of our Lake Forest properties, Hunter Court, is located within the El Toro Road corridor focus area at the southwest corner of El Toro Road and Rockfield Boulevard. And I guess, first of all, we appreciate the city's thoughtfulness and foresight in planning to accommodate future growth within Lake Forest through this update. We agree with the intention to locate new and higher density housing near major roadways and transportation facilities, as was just discussed. And we believe there is potential for development of successful mixed-use projects within these key focus areas, and particularly within the El Toro Road corridor. I would like to suggest that the City Council study Theme 2 within the El Toro Road focus area within the EIR. We believe that the 60 unit per acre mixed-use land designation should be studied in the EIR to determine whether that level of housing intensity can be accommodated, rather than deciding today to limit it to 43 units to the acre. We think it should be studied. Given the long-term nature of the general plan, we think the city should consider the addition of this higher intensity housing designation to accommodate growth over a 20-year period. And we also believe that 50 to 60 units to the acre of intensity is likely to more likely to promote redevelopment and investment within existing commercial areas. While the design and aesthetics of higher density housing may be a concern to some people here, and a concern in allowing intensities up to 60 units per acre, we would like to note that the city should be able to maintain a level of control throughout the project approval process within these key areas, and specifically through the design review process. So I appreciate your time and consideration tonight, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alexa Washburn, followed by Larissa Clarke.
Well, good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. My name is Alexa Washburn. I'm Vice President of Planning with National Community Renaissance, so we're also known as National Core. National Core is the largest nonprofit workforce and affordable housing developer and builder in Southern California. We're currently working with the city on acquiring a site for a future workforce housing community. I want to commend the city for embarking on this general plan update and for being proactive in directing future growth and development in these focus areas. The focus areas make sense. They're largely underutilized commercial and industrial areas, and thereby protect, preserve, and enhance your existing single-family residential neighborhoods. I do have one recommendation that I would like for you as council, as well as the GPAC and the consultant team and staff to consider. I would like you to consider increasing your mixed-use 25 land use designation and your urban industrial residential land use designation, as well as your medium density land use residential land use designation, from a maximum 25 dwelling units per acre to a maximum 30 dwelling units per acre. By increasing the maximum density to 30 dwelling units per acre, this will provide several benefits to the city. Number one, it will allow these sites to count towards meeting your regional housing needs allocation. The State Department of Housing and Community Development, as well as state law, allows sites that allow 30 dwelling units per acre to automatically, by default density, count towards your low income, very low income, and extremely low income regional housing needs allocation. Secondly, a simple land use or land economics. Land in Lake Forest is extremely expensive. And I know that because I have been working closely with city staff in identifying and acquiring a site for this future workforce housing community. Right now, land is averaging about $3 to $3.5 million per acre. By increasing the density to a maximum 30 dwelling units per acre, that allows projects like mine that I'm working on with the city, as well as that are first-time home buyers, townhomes, and those to financially pencil. Increasing it dwelling units per acre and allowing me to use the density bonus, I can make the land economics start to work on a project like mine. Also, number 3 is by increasing the maximum density to 30 dwelling units per acre, this strengthens your retail base. I think Will spoke to this as well as Amanda, is that the retailers like to see those units and that compact development in close proximity to the retail development. So this will strengthen your retail base. And 4, I encourage the council to consider density or to consider design over density. I think Amanda alluded to this, is that there are often dense projects and products that look like medium density developments, and it's because they are well designed and you have control over the design. And by doing this, you change the parking situation, you can screen parking, you start to get into parking structures. Right now, at this low density of 25 dwelling units per acre, we're using much of the land for surface parking. So much of the land's being spent.
You can wrap up, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, lastly, I do strongly consider that you consider design over density. Again, thank you, and I commend you for taking on this process.
Thank you very much.
Our last speaker will be Larissa Clarke.
Hi. Larissa Clark, resident since 1998, and I actually live right off of Rockfield. So that would be the El Toro Road corridor. And I kind of have more like a question or for DeNova about the plans, but just comments. So in this El Toro Road corridor configuration was the I-5 widening project mentioned to the general plan. That will be completed from El Toro Road down to the 73 by 2024. Then after that, the El Toro Interchange project, which means they're going to redo El Toro Road on and off of that 5 freeway once it is completed widening, approximately 2025. That project will start. Was that considered for the businesses, homes, / whatnot in this, any of the themes along El Toro Road corridor? Also with this El Toro Road corridor, mixed use is great. I agree with the commenter before me, design, and design. But also remember that if there is high density living right on the freeway, this is a driving culture. And we still have all of our residents in the center and farther up the hill with developments coming by 2025 that still need to drive down that hill. So I just kind of want to caution, like, I know that they have to look into the traffic impacts and things like that, but if they're going to tear out this at 2025, that kind of hits with this. So those are my concerns living right off of Rockfield, and just some heads up things for me. And then the final thing on the signage, if we are going to promote businesses, which we really need to, that is golden down there. So if they're already widening the I-5 and the ROW and all that stuff's going to be tore up, let's really reach out to those businesses. Really get them some signage, get them some notification, and also, like, as soon as you hit bake, you're entering Lake Forest. Let's have a look. let's get the signage out there, because we'll have brand-new interchange for easy on-off into our city. That money gets spent there. So I wanted to be a part of the general plan thing, but had other things and a few conflicts with dates. But so far, great job, and that were my comments on that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more public?
No other speaker.
Facebook Live.
We have one, Your Honor. Jim Gardner, comment for council. I provided a detailed report to the city clerk for your perusal. I wanted to summarize some of the major weaknesses in the proposed general plan. There is no empirical rationale for the focus areas. Substantial data on the focused areas is missing: crime, sales tax revenue, and traffic uses. Some of the data being used need to be better defined. Jobs should be better defined in terms of how much they pay, not merely that there are jobs. All things equal, the city should be interested in creating better paying jobs, not merely jobs. Similarly, non-residential square feet should be better defined in terms of sales tax revenue and jobs created, not merely square feet. All things equal, we want businesses that generate jobs and revenue, not merely fill space. Data being used in this report is based on different years for different measures. 2016 for jobs, 2013 for population. The data should all be based on the same year, and given that we are in 2019, experience rapid growth in jobs and population, this old data is unacceptable. There are many false assumptions in the report. The assumption of linearity, the failure to account for changes in quality as quantity increases, and the use of business as usual for a city that has experienced dramatic changes as a result of external factors that are unlikely to continue. There are worrisome uses of figures. For example, the population for Lake Forest in the report is 81,000, while the city itself uses 85,000 as the right number. The report commingles household size for single-family and multifamily residents, yet the differences are 15%, which is significant when applied across 30,000 housing units. The most popular theme is something labeled GPAC additional considerations, for which there is no description. More problematic than all of these weaknesses is the paper and pen approach to planning. The time for a static 20-year plan has long passed. The report should have been developing principles, relationships, and algorithms to allow for dynamic planning in a world where changes in regulations, macroeconomics, retailing, and housing preferences are rapidly changing. The authors of this report promised publicly and privately that they would produce a report that met 21st century challenges, but they failed miserably.
Okay, anything else from Facebook Live? Okay, thank you very much. So we will close public comment. We appreciate that. And City Manager, what's your preference at this point? How would you like to proceed?
I think we'd like to go theme by theme, area by area. And so we would start with the first focus area on El Toro Road.
If I could, curious as to the schedule for this, because this is dimensional chess going on here. You start interjecting not only different themes and sub-considerations within those themes, but there's financial considerations. So it gets pretty complicated, and hopefully we can get through all that tonight, but leaving open that we don't. Is there some driver here, or this is a self-driven initiative? Help me understand, just so I understand what we're
Well, this is a self-driven initiative, but when we embarked on this, we wanted to finish it within 18 months.
Okay.
And so in order to get into the study phase, which really is where a significant amount of time is, we need to select our areas that we are going to study and what land uses we're going to study. And so there's no hard deadline for this. It's just something that the council wanted, an aggressive timeline to get through this project.
And I'm all for that. I just want to make sure there was no other externality that I need to be made aware of. Okay. And let me just also out, is there any interest in a global discussion about particular land uses that we might agree we don't want to consider under any theme? And I'll throw one out. I appreciate the input of others. That the 60 concerns me. Question, where would we find anything approaching 60 in Lake Forest today? What's the most dense thing we'd find in our town today?
Probably, we don't have anything at 60 units to the acre. So at 60, you're probably looking at a 4 or 5-story residential project. So certainly Irvine would have that, things we're seeing in Laguna Hills, nothing in the city of Lake Forest. Our current highest general plan designation is 43 units per acre. So 60 units per acre isn't something that was envisioned, 25 years ago in that general plan.
Right, but what do we find today? What would I find today as the densest we would find? I know there's allowance for 43, but what do we find today in Lake Forest?
I would estimate it's closer to 25, maybe the Avalon apartments. Everything we have is just pure surface parking. So as we heard from one of the speakers, at that 25 units per acre, you're still got a lot of surface parking, a little bit of density probably, and no, that would probably be the best example that we have.
Okay. So I'm just curious if my colleagues have any interest. Do we want to keep everything on the table, or is there any desire to have a conversation around whether there's any of these we would just say that doesn't interest us, we don't see that as being Lake Forest? I'm concerned about 60. One, I think it's incredibly dense, and I think it's the height becomes maybe a concern for me as well. And obviously, as we heard, that contributes to more people, and that contributes to traffic, and traffic is good. That's commerce happening. We like that, but I have that concern. So I'm just putting it out there if my colleagues have any interest in that or not. If not, we can just delve into the theme by theme.
Well, I agree. I think 60 is definitely a bit too dense. You're also running into problems with OCFA. They'd have to reevaluate how the fire authority would handle high-rise density housing. What they've done in Irvine, they've had to completely amend how they handle Irvine. I don't see it fitting into the culture of Lake Forest, so I'm okay nixing 60.
Colleagues, any other thoughts on that?
So, in general, I would agree. I think that looking at it on the El Toro Road corridor, though, is worthy of discussion. Again, we'd be looking at the impacts, not necessarily making any decisions whatsoever. I think that it could be informative to look at the impacts in one specific area, and if there was a particular area where it might make the most sense, even though it probably doesn't make sense anywhere, I would say probably along the El Toro Road corridor. So if I were to pick one area, just again to try to get the data, I would suggest that one corridor, but nowhere else. And that would be my suggestion.
I would concur. 60 is way beyond what we have now. And the thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to integrate change without actually changing the environment of what we have in Lake Forest. I like the mixed use. I'm not afraid of the height when you're talking about having businesses on the lower level and maybe townhouses up above as we mix use. But when we're talking about entering the city of Lake Forest and what the impact of 60 would be high in anything other than right along the freeway, maybe even the Lake Forest corridor back, some of the older areas back there off of Lake Forest Drive.
You're looking at me, so for me, it's just El Toro Road. I don't think that it really makes sense anywhere else.
I'm not stuck on any of these, and I think that I first want to say thank you to DeNovo and Amanda. Thank you for leading the discussion, and I think that our GPAC group came together and maybe had differences in the beginning, but then saw the common good of what we were trying to do in a long-range plan for the future vibrant city of Lake Forest. So thank you.
I generally agree with everyone's comments here. I just want to say, though, that it's used mixed use 60 is used, I think, only twice in the focus areas, both El Toro Corridor and Lake Forest Drive. And I know in Laguna Hills they have a very similar project, mixed use 60, on the other side of the freeway near the Trader Joe's. And those are all determined by design developer agreements. The configuration is important. That all can change. It doesn't necessarily need to be vertical. It could be horizontal. That particular design, though, is troublesome because it is a vertical design, and also the retail units on the bottom were empty for 3 years. So, and I don't think the Lake Forest has the market demand for a mixed-use 60, but I think we should go by the focus areas and kind of vote before we kind of just completely eliminate a use.
Okay. So I'm not sure what to make of that. So it sounds like there's still some desire to keep the 60 on the table. Another thing, if I may, is this notion of affordable or attainable housing. I'm curious to know these products and what they look like in terms of cost and affordability or attainability when we start thinking in terms of these densities. Obviously, if they're denser, they may be lower in cost and therefore potentially more affordable, depending on how it's amenitized, but
yes, and we're in Ben Ritchie, principal with De Novo Planning Group. We're dealing with rules of thumb, so there's no hard and fast, clean solution on what's going to be affordable, and there's going to be different product types that different developers put forward. At high-end luxury units, there's going to be density at more, just more attainable units based on their nature, their unit size, square footage, things of that nature. But as history has shown us and what the state guidelines tell us in terms of meeting URENA, as the previous speaker was noting, the higher the density, the more affordability you will find inherent within each project. And then also compliance with the city's affordable housing ordinance. When you get larger projects at higher density, you will, by the sheer math, get more units that are below market rate affordability in terms of complying with your affordable housing ordinance. But in general, the rule of thumb is when seeking more affordability in housing options, you go for higher density levels. With that said, one of the primary tenets of our effort here and your role here as the council is to make sure that the plan that comes out of this, the land use map that comes out of this, still achieves your community's vision for itself in the future. And 60 dwelling units an acre may not be the appropriate choice for every community in California. It's certainly not applicable everywhere. And so you don't necessarily expect that most projects coming through the door will request the maximum. Historically, you haven't seen that here in Lake Forest. You have allowances that are significantly higher than what you see built on the ground now. But if you were to approve the 60 dwelling units an acre, you would expect to see apartment projects at heights and densities greater than what you have now. I'll also note that what goes part and parcel with this land use map is the robust policy set that makes up the entirety of the rest of the general plan. So we'll have a community design element that focuses on the design aspects that we need to meet and adhere to. You'll continue to implement your design review and your residential design guidelines, and you'll still have a lot of say in making sure that the final product that comes forward is going to be acceptable from a circulation, parking, design, height, all your zoning code provisions will still apply, but this would be a step in a direction beyond density than what you currently have now.
Okay. Yeah.
If I may add, and thank you for mentioning our arena, and there's also SB 50 coming down the pike, which is basically going to enforce low-income housing by a certain percentage. So that's where the density game will come into play because land use is so coveted in South County.
Yes, so for jurisdictions that have residential densities that don't meet what the state's wish list is for residential densities, and our new governor is making a very strong push for affordable housing. He's really making it his marquee issue. If you're at densities below 40 units an acre in some of these key corridors and key residential areas, if SB 50 passes the legislature this year, it's not a guarantee yet, but signs are pointing towards yes, then you will lose some land use control in terms of height restrictions and overall densities if you were to, what I'll say, underzone these parcels. Whereas if you were to go with the 60, now I'm not suggesting that you go with a density level higher than what you're comfortable with so that the state can't usurp control from you later, but if you were at the 43s and the 60s, those would be above the threshold that would allow private development applications to come in and say, I demand a waiver from your height and density requirements. So.
Right, that's exactly what happened.
Thank you, Sacramento.
Mandates.
Okay, so do we want to just, I tossed out the idea about getting rid of the 60. I don't want to squelch that conversation since there wasn't unanimous, so we will proceed. So do we want to dive into El Toro corridor?
If that pleases you, we'll go ahead and start with El Toro. I recognize for everyone in the public that is here looking at the screen, it is impossible to read. We do have hard copies of this available in the back of the room, so if you would like to follow along and have the hard copies of the slide and material that you see on the screen, we have those available for the public as well. So they don't need to rely on the illegible font located on this. So what I'd like to do is just briefly summarize the approach to the themes and the GPAC feedback that we received regarding this focus area, and then after just a very brief minute or two presentation of those key aspects, allow you to continue forward in your deliberation. Okay. So the business as usual theme in this focus area is largely comprised of an existing designation of commercial. It is applied pretty continuously from the freeway to the northern border of the theme, again just short of Muirlands Boulevard, not including any of the existing residential area. So maintaining your existing fully commercial designation at this location is reflected as theme 1. Theme 2 looks at the application of the 3 levels of mixed-use development that we defined as part of the designation options. So again, as for reference, that was the highest density allowed was the MU60. Applying that in a very limited fashion, most adjacent to the freeway, so at the southern end of El Toro corridor, closest to the freeway interchange. Then stepping that down in a tiered fashion, moving as you go north of Rockfield, looking at applying the mixed-use 43 on the west side of El Toro, and then again stepping down one more level at the northern end, looking at MU25. In all of the 3 themes, we've reflected the intent to preserve your existing Arbors Shopping Center that has seen significant investment in redevelopment. So you'll see that that designation's maintained a pure commercial designation in all of the themes. Theme 3 looks at taking a similar approach to allowing for new housing development in this location, but starting at a lower density. So starting again with the tiered fashion, but using MU43 closest to the freeway, and then stepping back to MU25 as you work more northern after to the north side of Rockfield. And then the last theme presented in the report is theme 4, mixed growth. It is reflective of those ideas presented in theme 3, meaning that the parcels located most adjacent to the freeway begin at MU43, step down to MU25 as you go north. The defining characteristic of this theme is that its most northern end is applied a medium density residential designation. So that's the orange or yellowish color that you see on your map, indicating that this would not be a desirable location for a mix of uses, but just for residential only. The GPAC did not recommend any additional consideration theme for this location. Their preference was for theme 4, mixed use. You will note that you have a number of members on your GPAC. You have approximately 20 members, and we had a great turnout at our meeting. Not every member voted for their preference on every sheet, so please don't take the indication in the reflection of how your GPAC members voted their preference to indicate that it was a poor showing. They provided their feedback and commentary, but for personal reasons or whatever it may be, they, in periodic situations, chose not to indicate their preference. Theme 4 received 5 votes for preference in this location, followed by Theme 2, which received 2 votes for preference. Theme 2 received 3 votes, Theme 3 for 2 votes, and no one felt that continuing as the business as usual scenario was the preferred path forward in this location. So with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, but really this is a discussion amongst yourselves and consideration of all of the feedback we received and recorded as part of this, and we're here to facilitate that, answer questions, or you can just have at it.
All right. Colleagues, let's have at it. Anybody want to?
I'll chime in.
Sure.
I really like theme 4 for this one. I like the how it continues to have expanded employment like in theme 3, except it has a transition to medium density housing. It also has the least amount of change from if we do our business as usual, so it wouldn't be so jarring. It seems like it's a nice gradual change as you come into the city off of the freeway with less of an impact on traffic and other things like that. So that would be my personal preference for El Toro Road corridor.
Okay. Can I ask staff or de novo, the comment made about going from 25 to 30, and that's somehow is an enhancement or a betterment over 25 to 30 for some reasons? Is that somebody? Yeah, I just want to make sure I...
Yes, if I could answer that one. When we did our previous housing element, it covered the period from 2008 to 2013 to 2021, and we did have a lot of discussion with the state, and they're looking for a default density to them represents it's land that could be considered potential for an affordable product, and they used at that time 30 as the default density, and so that is true. Our medium density residential in our existing general plan is 25 units to the acre. So we really did have, that was a problem for the city. As I mentioned earlier, our highest designation was 43 units per acre, but at that time, HCD was looking at 30 was a benchmark, not knowing what the future lies ahead, but that's true. There's a big difference in the eyes of HCD between 25 units per acre and 30.
So is that something we should be paying serious attention to, that 30? Is that something we should be considering here? It's not currently a number here.
Depending on where we land on each of these areas, I'll have a more calibrated answer for you at the end of the evening. You don't have your RENA issued to you for the next cycle yet. We don't have a crystal ball in terms of knowing what it is, but we're trying to anticipate setting you up to meet your RENA with this map without having to redesignate sites when it's time to prepare your housing element shortly on the heels of this general plan update. So if as we work our way through and the council is steering away from adding for MU43 in areas, it doesn't mean you have to pick a bunch of MU60, but if we find ourselves at the end of tonight's discussion and we have deviated away from residential numbers, we will come back and have some suggestions on how to better position yourself for your next housing element cycle. On the flip side of that is if we do gravitate towards some of the themes for these focus areas that seem to be providing enough residential capacity that we think with our fuzzy crystal ball that'll meet the state's next round of numbers. You won't necessarily have to adjust your medium density up to 30, but that's a policy question we'll be bringing back to you as part of the land use policy set. And I really want to emphasize that. Today we're really focused on the map, but I don't want this map to exist in a vacuum. There is an entire portfolio of policies that go along with supporting and accommodating the map to make sure it comes to fruition.
Well, I guess, but does staff have any position regarding whether we should consider 30 at this juncture or just wait for that next round and tackle it then?
If you want to tackle it.
It would just be, it's an increase over from 25 to 30, which is not the same increase from 25 to 43. So it is an increase in the number of units. People don't always choose to build at that overall maximum number of units, but our past history has said HCD, that could be very favorable to us, especially if we have a lot of land uses on our map that fall into that 25 category. If it fell into a 30 category, we have a lot more flexibility theoretically as we deal with the next RENA cycle.
So I guess this may not be the right thought, but let me throw it out. So if I'm doing an EIR, I'm thinking I kind of want to burden it a little bit in terms of understanding the traffic impacts, because if we go and say 25 and then somebody comes back later and says, no, 30, well, now we're back out to doing more traffic studies or understanding what the traffic implications of that versus going from 30, and we can always, just a thought.
No, and it's a very good one. So one suggestion I might have, if we have uniformity on the council that we're comfortable saying, hey, let's go 25 to 30 and let's just do it. And I don't get the sense that we're at that position right now. We could apply the assumption of 30 to all of as the upper range for our medium density, and we could apply it, to the MU25. We could think of it as NU30. That's one option, if we were comfortable going that direction. The other option, which I might suggest, is to proceed moving through each of the 5 areas as shown with the MU25 and the understanding that currently your medium density caps out at 25. And as we develop that benchmark map, that benchmark plan. We can then revisit it when we look at what the build-out projections are, come back to the council and ask you a policy question and say, all of the areas that are currently maxed out at 25, do you want to bump that incrementally up to 30 with the same land use themes that you've just picked?
Okay.
I like that. For the fact is that, obviously we want to incentivize property owners and builders to actually work with us, and so I like that as we look at it case by case.
Yeah, and then without muddying the waters too much, the other part of the point that was made earlier about the request from the woman affordable housing developer who spoke was the incremental change in density allows for the financial feasibility. The pro formas pencil out on different product types, and you start to, while density in and of itself can be scary and you think more traffic, when you start to make that jump into the next tier of density, you start to realize different product types that can come online financially from the private sector. So those could be undergrounded parkings, those could be parking structures, those could be more wrapped products with more interior courtyards and facilities that are shielded from public view. And so there's not a magic number. The land equations are changing constantly. The construction costs are changing constantly. But as you move into that next tier, 25 plus, getting up into the 30 range, you start to free up other options for the type of product that can be built. And you also provide more incentives for the private sector. So if you're dealing with an area that is in need of restoration and they only see a marginal increase in profit in terms of going in, tearing down, losing rent for a couple of years, and then rebuilding with a new product, the lower densities usually don't provide enough of a carrot to see that land turn over with newer uses. And as you start to look at the higher densities, the numbers will pencil and you're going to see private investment more excited about the prospect of tearing something down and building larger, newer projects. So more of a carrot to see parcels turn over.
Okay. What I'm taking away, though, is there'll be a conversation about the 25 or 30 at some point down the road, so we don't need to settle that today.
Yes, sir.
All right. Colleagues, anybody else have any thoughts? Heard the Mayor Pro Tem express interest in 2. 4. I'm sorry, 4.
So just getting back to that conversation a little bit, my understanding would be, you said, depending on how we go tonight, you may come back to us with a recommendation for, say, MU30. So if we didn't approve any MU43, then it's possible that it's more likely that you'd come back and say, hey, to meet your arena number, you're going to have to do something here, and that's when we might have to address that. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a very fair assessment. Okay. So if you guys went business as usual across the board, didn't like any of the changes, and we look up, we're like, I don't know where your units are going to come from on the next cycle, we'll come back knocking and say, you're going to want to think about this now before you adopt this map, and then a year and a half from now you're frustrated when it's housing element time. So
sure.
We will flag that for you. So.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and I really appreciated your final comment there about what we're really trying to do is incentivizing property owners to turn over their property, to do something new with it, improve it in some way. There's particular, especially some current retail centers along El Toro and Lake Forest Drive that haven't turned over in a long time. And they're just not financially incentivized to do so. But, they're slowly deteriorating the quality of the tenants that they have. No offense to any of the tenants, but, they tend to be classified as more marginal retail businesses than others, and so we want to make sure that we've got a lot of residents who've been communicating to us during this GPAC process, and then just talk to each one of us and the city regularly. Talk about the quality of certain types of retail shops, the quality of certain types of restaurants, and to create the right environment. I think that we need to provide the incentive for the property owner. Mr. Mayor, you mentioned kind of using some of these models as kind of a test. So we want to see what kind of impacts we have. And again, that's where, I was thinking that in this El Toro Road corridor, it's the only one that really makes sense for me to take a look at MU60. And I'm not suggesting that in any way. I'm just saying I think that it would be really good to study the actual traffic impacts that we have there, look at the financial viability of something like that working. Maybe it doesn't work. From a visual perspective, I think it's probably houses the tallest building that we have in Lake Forest. I don't know what the bank building would be considered in an MU 25, 43, 60, whatever, but it's the tallest building in Lake Forest. And as we're talking about design versus density, and as we're talking about the different layers that you were explaining, so basically stacking versus, spreading out. That's one of those that stacks, but there's a lot of parking around it. And so, it's something that, again, it's one area where I think that it's worth studying, so I lean more towards Theme 2. I know that from the GPAC perspective, Theme 4 had 5 votes versus 3 for Theme 2 and 2 for Theme 3. But I think that, if we're going to ever test how an MU60 would impact the city, I think this is the right spot to do it. So that's where I'm at.
All right.
I think as we consider our choices for El Toro Road, I don't know what your involvement's going to be in, but these are the things that I'm hoping that you can supply to us when we give you our choice. I would love to see an overlay of what the traffic would look like, depending on what we choose. But also something that hasn't been taken into account in the reporting is schools. And, if we're looking at, the expanded housing choice, we're going to be increasing the population in that area by 8,000 people. We're going to need a school. Even if we do number 4, that's almost 6,000 people. So, understanding what we're doing here, I don't know if it's possible to incorporate some sort of school in these new areas because it's going to overcrowd the existing ones we have.
Sure. So the environmental impact report absolutely looks at those two topics. So we'll have a much more refined traffic analysis, understanding at the roadway segment and intersection level of analysis what the impacts will be with your benchmark plan. And additionally, we do look at schools' impacts, and we do an analysis based on the school district's there's a student generation rate per unit, so we'll calculate what the student generation rate would be under the benchmark plan. What we try to tiptoe very carefully around when doing general plan land use maps is citing schools. Obviously, the city, as the entire council is aware, is not in the business of procuring sites and then selecting where they're located. So we're going to have a policy portfolio that calls for collaboration with the schools, communication in terms of anticipated student generation rates, and then have policy language in here that will make it easy for the schools to ultimately procure sites, because we're going to try and make schools a blanket allowed use in most land use designations that are appropriate, short of industrial and things like that. So, but the answer to your question will come in the EIR analysis in terms of what will the student generation rate be, what's the current capacity of the districts in their existing facilities, and then what's the delta.
Okay, and then also you're going to be analyzing the traffic patterns, correct?
Correct.
Is it possible, would you be able to look at current traffic versus future traffic? We'll see these numbers side by side, so we'll know what we're looking at?
That's exactly. We do an existing and then an existing plus, and then we do a cumulative plus project. So we look at future conditions, and the previous comment about future Caltrans facilities, widenings, interchanges, those are factored into the cumulative analysis, so we don't just look at what's the roadway configuration today, we look at what the planned configuration will be as well.
Okay, now would that also include crime statistics? Current crime statistics, of course you can't anticipate what the crime's going to be, but if we can look at the area in which we're trying to redevelop and look at the existing crime patterns, I don't know if that's something...
To the extent that the data is available, so we're a bit hamstrung in terms of generating new data, but in terms of what the department has available in terms of reporting, we can present that information, and we can also talk about crime prevention through environmental design. So it's things like dark alleyways and properly lit and eyes on the street, the different land use and site planning components that go towards crime reduction. But I wouldn't venture to do a crime generation projection based on a land use plan, but to the extent that the data is available, we can report it and talk about it in the EIR.
Certainly. So if we're looking at an area that has generally a higher crime rate, you can provide ways that we can, in the future, mitigate some of those scenarios.
Absolutely. And it's Robert on the GPAC? Yes. Robert on the GPAC, that actually brought, with his experience in law enforcement here in Lake Forest, that was actually a topic of conversation as the GPAC was discussing certain focus areas. And one of the GPAC's thoughts that they wanted to convey to council was by providing incentives for redevelopment, we might see improvements in areas that are more prone to crime now, which could be a deterrent in the future by seeing revitalization, more positive nightlife, eyes on the street, and 24-hour positive activity.
Okay, I have a few more here. I know we're talking about employment, and this, I guess this is a general, broad picture. We're talking about expanding employment opportunities, but we don't really know what those employment opportunities are going to look like. As a council, maybe we should consider rezoning one of these areas and turning it into, I wrote it down. So many notes here, forgive me. Enterprise zones. I understand that there are some cities that have been doing enterprise zones to allow for emerging industries. And I don't know if this particular area would maybe qualify for something like that. We don't really know what that looks like at this point, but it may be something for the council to consider as we're doing this mixed use, if there can be somehow incorporating an emerging industry type of zoning. See if there's anything
I thought
else.
that was the urban industrial area that has the creative spaces.
I think that the urban industrial intent was to clarify that the desirable mix of uses there would be more creative, more dense, employment-dense spaces. I think what you're referring to is an actual economic development tool to designate an area officially as something designated as an enterprise zone. That would be a supplement to your land use designation, so you would still move forward with the appropriate designation that you feel represents your vision. We do have an economic development consultant as part of our team, Economic Planning Systems. They are preparing a standalone economic development element and policy set to support the objectives of your land use map. So that's absolutely something that we could be evaluating and considering as you move towards implementing your vision.
Thank you. Because I think it's really important that when we're talking about jobs, we need to make sure we're bringing the right jobs. And if we can incentivize businesses to come here, you know, for example, Amazon, wouldn't it have been great if we could have gotten Amazon in Lake Forest? Of course, we don't have the space for it. But it's things like that, finding a way to incentivize new upcoming industry to try to get the millennials in here. We're losing so many young people. We need to get those people back to Lake Forest. So I think that was all I had questions for this one. Oh. I'm sorry, one more. I knew I was looking for it. The El Toro widening project, has that been taken into consideration as we were looking at rezoning this area?
Yes, Caltrans hasn't issued final preferred design, so we don't have right-of-way footprint just yet, but we anticipate that that'll be available by the time we're preparing the traffic analysis for the EIR. But we're relying on Caltrans' schedule, so don't quote me on that. And did I hear a theme preference from you as part of those comments?
You did not.
Okay, I didn't think so. I was just baiting you there.
Would you like to share one?
I'm still mulling it over. I like to hear what everyone else is thinking, and usually that helps to influence my decision.
All right. Councilmember Weiss, did you want to?
Yeah, you know, Councilman Robinson's point about housing along the El Toro corridor, and for the prospect of having that studied, I think is a great addition. Expanded employment opportunities is variation a little bit off that, but mixed growth, theme 4 is probably my favorite along there, but I like all three of those themes, and I'm going to wait until I see future studies. I think that as we go farther down the discussion, microbreweries along these mixed areas, I think there's something exciting to a lot of the communities I've seen in different areas. I know Anaheim is getting a growing microbrewery community, and I think that is something that's intriguing to me.
If I could ask a clarifying question for those of you that were indicating a preference for theme 4, is that due to the distinct feature of having the medium density residential at the northern tip, or is it more related to the mixed use density level?
For me, it was a little bit of both. I like how dense it is close to the freeway, and then it gradually lightens up, and then also I think it's very unique to have the medium density at the very end of it. As you transition.
I think the GPAC was right in trying to densitize closer to the freeway, less impact for us as commuters in the city. You know, as people are watching this, because we're changing these overlays here, existing businesses like Home Depot at the corner of El Toro and Rockfield, why don't you, since it's a great input of taxes to our community, and it's probably, of the two Home Depots we have, that one was probably higher volume. So we're not actually saying that those got to go. So can you address that to the people that are listening and watching?
Sure. There's two lenses through which to look. So these mixed use allow for both commercial and residential uses. So Home Depot would fall under the category of a commercial use, and it would continue to be allowed to operate because it would be consistent with the land use designation. There may be some examples of existing businesses that may not be allowed under the mixed use designation, and those would be classified as a pre-existing non-conforming use. So nothing on any aspect of this land use change would cause the city to go in and say, you're no longer consistent with the map, pack your stuff, you got to go. So it could have implications for that business coming forward in the future, saying, I would like to expand, I would like a building permit to make my facility larger, and then the city may not be in a position to grant the permits for a non-conforming use. But the mixed use allows for commercial, so Home Depot and those other big tax generation, the tax revenue generators for you would be allowed under this designation.
One more question on that. As you're looking at mixed use, are you talking in one building to have commercial first floor and housing above?
No, we're providing flexibility. What we found historically, and the example was given about, hey, 3 years of vacant ground floor retail that just never quite filled up. Planners for years have really tried to force this idea of vertical mixed use. It's a utopia with ground floor retail and everybody lives above it, and many markets don't support that. And so we're envisioning the policy in support of these mixed use designations, allowing for either vertical or horizontal, so that the private sector can come in and say, look, we're not. A lot of these developers build either commercial or residential, and they're like, we're not in the mixed-use single-building business, and so this is intended to provide the flexibility for either or.
So in the mixed-use category of this strip along here, like the El Toro off-ramp of El Toro and the 5 freeway, would that mixed-use still feel okay with a new hotel going in at El Toro Road and the freeway?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I wanted to add one more reason why I liked Theme 4. That's because of the trip generation impact. At the end of the booklet on page it's Appendix B, Mobility Impact Memo, Theme 4, the mixed growth, increases trip generation very little. It's pretty much business as usual from what I'm reading here. But Theme 2 significantly increases trip generation. I mean, we are being told that without even an impact review, right? So,
yes,
for me, it's the least impact on traffic would be the Theme 4.
So that the assessment in the traffic information presented in the report is applied should you choose that theme and apply it to all 5 of the focus areas. So you could expect, if you were to customize your preference for each of those to create the benchmark plan, that you'd be keeping elements and benefits from each of them. So should that theme be applied globally to all of the areas, that did result in the fewest traffic impacts. However, you could offset that by finding the appropriate theme in some areas versus other areas, if that helps clarify.
Thank you.
Councilmember Boyce, did you care to share a thought at this point, or do you want to hear some more discussion elsewhere?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. I am interested in Theme 4. The 60 just concerns me. So I think at this point I'm on board with the Theme 4 discussion at this point.
I agree with Theme 4.
Okay. There's starting to be a little bit of mass there. So would we want to entertain a motion to pick one? All right.
Motion to vote on Theme 4.
Second.
Mixed growth.
All right. Any more discussion?
I'll make a substitute motion to move forward with Theme 2.
I'll second that.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second for Theme 2.
You make this tougher.
Let's go ahead and vote on that.
I'm sorry, which substitute, are we voting on the substitute first?
We're showing the substitute motion. So what before you is Theme 2.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
As we're going forward, are we... I'm not stuck on Theme 2. I just want the aspect of talking about the excess units being along El Toro Road for traffic-wise. So just kind of like a test area for us is kind of what I was insinuating that as. Because as we go forward, we haven't started studying traffic flow or anything yet, so.
Not yet. Well, the EIR traffic analysis is going to be robust and study the traffic flow in these focus areas for the benchmark plan, which will be your majority direction for each theme or for each focus area from this evening. To a lesser extent, we analyze alternatives, but they are done more at the qualitative level. And so what we don't, and I'll be blunt about it, the budget that we have doesn't allow us to do the full quantitative analysis for each scenario, for each focus area. So if you have one that you want to see studied, it ought to be the one that you think is the most appropriate land use designation. And if you wanted to see additional layers of study, that's something that can be accomplished if we came back and got a quote from our traffic consultant to provide that full quantification for each
in
one.
Theme 4, we're going up to medium density residential.
Theme 4 has primarily, it's got large areas of the MU 43 and areas of the MU 25 and areas of medium density. So the traffic analysis, if we went with Theme 4 for El Toro in the benchmark plan, would not quantify the 60 unit per acre traffic impacts in this location.
I'm gonna reconsider my second, and you just.
I think if I could, so once we have the benchmark plan, that's where the analysis will be done, the benchmark plan. Presumably, we could tweak it if we saw something really problematic, like, wow, the level of service is completely unacceptable. So it's not the final word on it, but this is the first analysis will be done in the benchmark plan. Is that right?
That is correct. And then I'll also say you'll have, in terms of staying within schedule and budget, you'll have a lot more flexibility to ratchet down the densities than you will to ratchet up, because we can say we have stayed within the umbrella of the worst case scenario analyzed in the traffic study. So if you come back and say it's too bad, scale back on density, piece of cake. If you come back and say, wow, it's not as bad as we thought, let's push for 60, we'll have to recrunch numbers to tell you where your traffic impacts will land at that higher level of development intensity.
Right, but just because it says 60 doesn't mean somebody has to show up with a project that says I want 60. They could come in at 43 or 25, so it's not, it's a worst case.
It's a worst case
scenario.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I need to find out what your
first and second is.
Right, no, I understand, but you said you were considering withdrawing your second, so.
Well, I'm actually willing to consider. I'm willing to consider number 2 just for that purpose. If we're looking at numbers, it's going to give us a worst case scenario.
We can draw back down.
Yeah, we can draw it back. But second. It's easier to do that than to have you go back and do more work to figure out what the higher density, higher traffic would have been. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so so we have a vote on 2, which is where we were already. Okay. So please vote on theme 2.
Motion passes 4-1 with Mayor Teddemer dissenting.
All right. That was the first of 5.
I promise it gets easier.
Does it?
It does.
Does it?
It does. It really does, because you're just going to be throwing out these designation terms like they're second nature to you.
Okay.
So, yes, that was a challenging one. Actually, in retrospect, as I thought about the order of operations for these, I thought I'm really asking a lot of everyone to think about El Toro first.
No, that was good.
There we go.
That was smart. I thought we were fresh.
So the next focus area location, we are at Lake Forest Drive Corridor. You will see, as presented, that there is a, quote, Theme 5 GPAC additional consideration option, so I will cover the 4 that were presented and evaluated as part of the themes report alongside the recommendation from the GPAC. The first theme, business as usual, this area is largely reflected as a mix of commercial, industrial, and office development. It is also home to your emerging hospitality industry with great freeway visibility and finding synergy in similar uses, particularly along Rockfield. And that area has been seeing a lot of new investment and development, particularly in hospitality. So theme 2, expanded housing choices. Just to help clarify and make it easier as you look theme to theme, you'll notice that the bottom portion of the L, so the area between the freeway and Rockfield, that's the same in every theme. So once you look at it once, you can just carry forward and look at it in all of them. All of the new themes reflect that area with a mixed-use office designation and a portion closest to the apartment at the southern border as mixed-use 43. The intent of the mixed-use office designation in this location is to bring jobs closer to your hospitality industry. The feedback we received from your hospitality providers were that the primary occupants of hotels here in Lake Forest are your employees, people that are coming here to work and spend time, and those are really what helps sustain the livelihood of these hospitality industries. So finding opportunities to increase the number of employees in proximity would be beneficial to that node. So again, that theme carries forward along the bottom portion of the L in all of the alternatives. So really focusing kind of on the upper end of the L along Lake Forest Drive, between Lake Forest Drive and the city's boundary. Theme 2 looked at identifying that area as mixed use 60. The intent was to create a standalone, vibrant entertainment activity center that was really largely self-contained. It's significant enough in size that those areas and uses could coexist within that kind of focused area. Theme 3 looked at expanded employment choices. So on one side, looking at the visual quality traveling along Lake Forest Drive, reflecting a mixed-use 43 designation along the street frontage, and then between the parcels closest to Lake Forest Drive, working your way back towards the city's boundary, identifying that as urban industrial. So no residential is part of that. The dark purple by itself is just urban industrial, reflecting the intent to increase the number of employees or employment density in that portion of the focus area. Theme 4 looked at mixed growth. That kind of purple-white hatch, that's urban industrial, so what we just discussed, plus the opportunity for residential, so the urban industrial residential designation. Again, as was mentioned previously, that maximum density is consistent with your medium, consistent with the MU25, and allows for a maximum density also of 25. So the allowable uses could cohabitate in vertical or horizontal formats. The GPAC did ask that you consider an additional opportunity here reflected as Theme 5, that they recognized that this was a desirable location in their opinion for new residential development given its proximity to regional activity centers, the train station, and the boundary of the city's edge. They felt that you should consider as part of Theme 5, instead of mixed use 60, a mixed use 43. So you'll see that that designation is reflected on the upper end of that L. So again, the report was prepared, presented to the GPAC at their meeting earlier this month. We received and summarized their feedback, reflected their additional consideration on your council material, but the report was prepared prior to their feedback. So that's why the Theme 5 is not included as part of the themes report.
Can you clarify that one more time? It's the very top part that they're...
The entire area north of Rockfield Boulevard, between Rockfield and the boundary of that focus area. So the entire area reflected kind of in red.
Oh, it's in here?
Yep. Yes.
I like mixed-use growth. Theme 4, I think it gives me the widest variety of choices for the property owners and developers to actually work with us as a city. I understand what they want to do with Theme 5 by the 43 to 46 or 60. I think that that would be medium growth, medium mix, with that medium for the mixed use. Is that MU 43?
So in Theme 4, the original note that you made, mixed growth, that designation of urban industrial residential allows a density up to 25 DUs an acre. The GPAC additional consideration was up to 43 DUs an acre.
For the purpose of study and variety, I think that the 43 along there, they include mixed growth, theme 4, mixed growth with the reflection of MU 43 is the max for that. Instead of the 25 medium.
Yes, so that would be reflected as the GPAC additional consideration. Exactly as you're describing it was what they would like for you to consider.
Okay. It's just purpose of studying. That way, the effect is that we can always come down.
And one thing I'd like to make sure we're clarifying is that the theme 4 mixed growth is, and we use the term mixed a lot, so I want to clarify. That is not the mixed-use commercial residential designation. That is the urban industrial residential designation.
Microbreweries just fine.
In theme 4. So if we went with the theme 5 mixed use, I would say the tap room is fine, but the brewery facility is not.
Okay, so and then the auto dealership is on the corner of. That fit into the general plan? I mean, if the auto dealership wanted to expand, are we closing them off by barricading any future property for them?
No, the dealership would be compatible.
Even if they wanted to buy the next parcel up?
No, under both of those scenarios, auto dealership would be compatible. We have to figure out the exact use codes, but
just because that's something that we would like to see them expand, and they've got parking issues, and so if this land starts moving around and we allow one of the property owners to sell some of that property and they want to buy and invest and maybe do some mixed-use residential along with some more parking for the expanded auto dealership lot. We just want to do everything we can to keep them in our city of Lake Forest.
We would see them as part of the vision for any of these areas.
So I never call them Irvine Subaru. That's Lake Forest Subaru to me.
Very good.
Yes.
So for me, I picked mixed growth theme 4. And the reason why I did that is it sounds like we're all ratcheting up, but then we're going to end up with a general plan with really large high-density areas, and I just want us to be really cognizant of doing that because it's good also to focus in. So in this area, there is already a lot of commercial, there's business parks, and industrial uses here already. With theme 4, you can have, it's modified so that you can have stacked flats that have an urban industrial feel, which tie well to the commercial business park-like aspect, and also are not vertical. They're mostly in that type with the purple and white lined. That type is mostly horizontal in nature. That's what I was really looking for there, a very unique area to the city that is not necessarily so high density vertical up. I think that's a good area where we can do a nice horizontal look with that nice urban industrial feel because it's, again, right next to the freeway and emerging markets and businesses are there, so that would be a good spot for it. And that's the reason why I specifically chose mixed growth for that one, theme 4.
Okay.
So just so I understand how the GPAC responded.
Yes.
6 chose theme 5.
That's correct.
And 5 chose theme 3.
That's correct.
And 0 for the rest.
That was the result of their discussion.
Okay, great. And they've been spending a fair amount of time looking at all this stuff, and we've got a good cross-selection. So, you know, I kind of narrow it down to those two because I view them to be the developing subject matter experts on this particular topic. We get to make the ultimate decision, but we're leaning on them to do a lot of the research and analysis, and then giving you some direction so that we can do the full-blown EIR. First, in evaluating their theme 3, since that just slightly had the most votes for them, I see a little purple box in the commercial area in theme 5.
Oh, yes.
So I'm wondering if you could just explain that. Because
that is a good catch. That area has gone through a recent general plan amendment to reflect that. So as part of our effort to update your land use map, not only are we reflecting the vision of your preference, but we're also making sure all your technical edits have been incorporated into the map. So please consider in theme 5 that blue square being red. That that was an approved project and is not intended to be considered as part of the Theme 5
All right,
request.
that was my question, was it was just redeveloped, and so were they asking
Yes.
to already change it?
No,
You know,
no,
that
sir.
would be
They would like to reflect the
great.
appropriate designation
Great.
of that location.
And, you know, there's some areas in this, this is probably one of our older areas of town, aside from that commercial area that was just redeveloped. So some of the older office space and retail space that hasn't seen a facelift like portions of El Toro Road have. And, you know, I definitely want to try to see that incentivized as much as possible. I feel like this is something that we need to just keep reiterating. I need to remind myself of this, that just because something changes on paper here doesn't mean that it changes in reality. And each one of these projects that come before the council, and I can guarantee you that when these come before, I won't be sitting here. Okay, that part's for sure. So I'm just trying to make sure that there's as many options to whoever the 5 people are that are sitting here that get to make those decisions, and the residents that get to provide their feedback. With that said, you know, I'm probably leaning more towards the Theme 5 just to try to provide as many expansive options as possible. We can try to visualize what we think this is going to turn into. I'm guessing this area has a lot of different property owners. Is that fair to say? So it's, unless there's a very wealthy investor or REIT or something like that that is looking at buying all of it, it's probably going to change in pieces over time. And, you know, they're going to be looking at what makes sense and what doesn't. You know, it's like, for instance, I can think of the little office space that's across from the mobile home park there on Muirlands, right? And they have little balconies right now for that office space where you kind of get to look out on Muirlands. You know, so I could envision that maybe in my own mind as being something more residential, but I get a little deep into that, like where the bowling alley is. Right now, I can't even see it. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops. And I just think that we need to try to provide some options there for the property owners. And again, try to encourage them to turn some of it over. You know, I know that there's a little remodeling of some of the one of the centers there right now. And I kind of get a chuckle because they're just changing the red tile on top of the roof. And, you know, and I think about what, you know, that center probably really needs. But with the existing use opportunities that they have, they're just not going to infuse a bunch of capital to make that work, right? So what do they need right now? And so I'm really curious as to, you know, who the 6 are, and you probably don't know exactly who they were. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But, you know, I'm kind of interested in what are the property owners asking about in this particular area. And I know that we didn't have them all as part of the GPAC. It was just really a cross-selection of the community. And there were some representatives of particular interest there. But, you know, what's it going to take to really provide a good facelift there and to provide what residents are expecting, which are, again, not necessarily a bunch of housing. I really don't expect that if we change this, we're going to see a bunch of MU-43 apartment buildings and things like that. It's going to be a good balance. If it was apartment buildings all along Lake Forest Drive, I wouldn't recommend the council approve that. I think that would be crazy. You know, it needs a little bit of retail. It needs, you know, to be able to support that. I know that the retail environment's changing, but so, you know, it's, when I look at this, I'm just looking at what options I can provide. Each individual project's going to come before the council and get an up or down vote. And even before it comes before the council, I think there's communication from the city about what we're interested in and what we're not. So, you know, I'd just like to provide the options. So right now I'm leaning toward Theme 5, but I'll let you comment if you have any.
I will just summarize some of the GPAC feedback we received on this to provide some additional context, if that would be helpful.
Sure.
You'll see that the 2 themes that did receive the most preference, Theme 3 and Theme 5, reflected to varying degrees mixed use 43. That was ultimately, so if you were to combine both of those, the GPAC's preference was to see a density of mixed use at that level. They did not pursue the Theme 2 option at the mixed use 60. Again, that's why they asked us to consider an additional option for you at mixed use 43. Their discussion largely revolved around the same one you're having here tonight regarding what would provide enough motivation to see change that we want to see. Ultimately, they felt that those designations and those options were most likely to result, in their opinion, in the type of change they'd like to see here.
I'll second theme 5 because based upon the feedback from GPAC, I want to take their thoughts into consideration. And if they're considering theme 5 and theme 3, I want to focus on those. So yeah, I'm going to second that for 5. And in the future, when you bring back this report, can you change some of the colors? I'm crossing my eyeballs because it all looks the same.
Yes.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Will do.
Clarification, Councilmember Robinson, were you on board then with theme 5? I heard a comment about seconding. So
I am, yeah.
okay,
So
I want to clarify. So I'm keeping notes here. All right. Councilmember Voights, did you want to offer your thoughts?
I like that one.
Okay. I can support theme 5. I appreciate, Mayor Pro Tem, your interest in, was it the urban industrial? Which I think there is some of that, right? I'm seeing below Rockfield. Am I reading that correctly?
That would be for mixed-use office below Rockfield. However, we do have the opportunity, just as we've reiterated, if there are particular policy direction or guidance within the focus area that could be customized to reflect Mayor Pro Tem's desire on the type of configuration of uses or the design style here, we have the opportunity as part of the policy portfolio to further refine our vision for these areas to reflect any comments you may have about the mix of uses in a horizontal versus vertical configuration. If that would be a more design preference in this area, we could refine that land use designation here.
I am intrigued with the, is it urban industrial? I want to make sure I get those terms right. There's only
25. There's only 25.
I'm supportive of theme 5. I'm just curious to get my colleagues' thoughts about whether we would take that piece along Rockfield and change it from, and I agree the colors are challenging here, from, I'm seeing that's mixed-use office to urban industrial. Do I have that right? I mean, am I reading right now that it calls for mixed-use office?
The significant difference between those two designations would be the floor area ratio that we've defined for each of those, and also just the definition of the types of uses that would be most desirable. We can customize the narrative that supports each of these to allow for a mix of desirable uses that you'd like to see as part of that land use designation. So if the idea is that you kind of like the idea of a creative urban industrial uses coming into this area, we could work with the language to help support that as we talk about the actual way we define those land use designations.
So I'm not sure what.
So for instance, if you would like to see that mixed-use office also allow for limited urban industrial type of uses, we could amend the definition to reflect that as policy guidance.
Well, I would support that.
I would support that as well.
I would too.
Okay.
Yeah, because right now, to me, theme 5 is just offices, really.
Sure.
That's all it looks like to me at this point, and I really would encourage us to be creative in this area, because this is where we can be creative for those kinds of spaces. And again, not so vertical. A horizontal approach would be appreciated.
Okay, so I'm hearing some consensus around theme 5 and my suggestion, and I'll make this a motion that we support theme 5 with the broadening of the terminology to allow for some of the comments made by the Mayor Pro Tem into that area below Rockfield.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Please vote.
Motion approved unanimously.
Okay, I'm going to suggest a short break because there's no way I'm making it to the end of 3 more of these. Yeah. Unless you guys want to carry on and I can leave and come back. So, okay, we'll take 5. Thank you.
Thank you.
He said 8:45, 8:48. Oh, okay.
Oh, there it is. If I could have my council colleagues come back, we'll continue on. Here, that's for you right there.
I thought it was a lozenge.
It can be. Here's my pep talk. We're almost halfway. Okay, we're on to Civic Center area.
We are. So again, the new Civic Center area is very forward-thinking. We're envisioning what the future window or entrance to your new Civic Center is going to look like. This is an area that maybe some of your residents don't frequent very often, but hopefully they will when you have your new facility available. So primary entrance and primary access to your new Civic Center, again, will go through this focus area. So that was the intent in focusing on some future land use changes here. Your current business as usual theme designates the area primarily for light industrial. The focus area does extend to the east to Lake Forest Drive. There are commercial properties located along that corridor reflected as a commercial designation. Theme 2, expanded housing choices, looks at what I am calling the core, the center core area of this focus area. Again, the area that you would be most frequent driving through in order to get to your Civic Center. Theme 2, identify that area for mixed use 43. So creating opportunities for mixed commercial, housing, and job opportunities in a location convenient and accessible to your new Civic Center, and maintaining all other areas of the focus area as business as usual. Theme 3, expanded housing choices, looked at taking that core area and increasing the intensity, so increasing the allowable floor area ratio up to a higher level than is currently allowed under light industrial, with the desire to get some new employment generating uses in that core area and change the visual quality of what that entrance to your Civic Center would look like. The second component of Theme 3 occurs on the eastern side of the focus area, really east of the trail, and between the trail and Lake Forest Drive, looking at kind of moving what was envisioned as mixed use 43 in Theme 2, moving it over to the edge, so taking that and kind of picking it up and sticking it on the eastern side of the focus area. Theme 4 keeps that idea, keeps the mixed use 43 along Lake Forest Drive, but says that the rest of business as usual should just stay as is. The light industrial use would be appropriate in areas west of the trail. This is a location where the GPAC asked us to consider an alternative to bring to your consideration. So reflected is Theme 5 as a mixed use 25 designation in both the core and along Lake Forest Drive. So kind of thinking of those just two discrete areas, you've got these kind of sub-focus areas occurring in the core and along Lake Forest Drive, and what the mix and match of those would look like. You'll see that the overwhelming preference for those voting members at our GPAC meeting was reflective of the Theme 5 alternative, and the intent was that they did find that this was a desirable location for an integration of both commercial and residential uses, but at a density that's perhaps more traditional with what you would see developed currently in Lake Forest. Again, the real focus for the GPAC members in that discussion was what would it take to create that vibrant window and beautiful aesthetic for those people driving through these areas to get to your Civic Center, and they unanimously preferred the Theme 5 alternative.
All right, colleagues?
I agree. I like Theme 5.
Okay, so I did a lot of research on this one because this, I think, impacts a lot of my constituents here, as well as another theme. But anyway, I do like Theme 5, but the thing is right now it is light industrial. So if you're going into our beautiful new Civic Center, multi-million-dollar civic center. You get a bunch of big industrial buildings and trucks and storage. And it's just not the look and feel that I would envision in 10 years or even 5 years for our, the first impression of coming into the Civic Center should be. So at an MU 25, which is theme 5, I don't think there's enough of a market incentive there to do that. These are big industrial businesses. And the other thing is that area adjacent down the way towards Baker Ranch is all residential. So then down the street you would have, like a couple big companies and then also more residential. I mean, I think it would be nice to see something different. I wish Theme 5 had, again, an element of urban industrial. That's where you see the most visual change, right? So that's where we can make some really nice visual impacts when you come in to the street and you can actually see, So for me, I preferred Theme 3. And I could see why GPAC selected 5 because it combines 2 and 4, but the difference is that it kind of brings down the density in the housing-centric one. So, for me, I would have liked to see the 5 have some sort of that urban element to kind of tie in the commercial, urban industrial part of it, but it doesn't. So now I'm torn.
You also, I just want to clarify, this is council's prerogative. You can provide any clarification, direction, or amendments to any of the presented themes to help reflect what your preference is. So don't feel confined by those presented. Those are the ones that we evaluated as part of the report, and we did receive additional feedback from GPAC. But it's your preference and direction to customize those in a way that should be reflected on the benchmark plan. So if you'd like to propose something else as part of this process, that's obviously your choice.
Indeed. Councilmember Robinson, do you have a preference, thoughts?
Sure. So first of all, can you explain with the urban industrial versus the mixed use, the FAR max is the same, right?
There are different FARs allowed for the different mixed-use levels. So obviously we wouldn't want a huge maximum ginormous FAR when the density might only be 25. So they step up in a reflective level based on the density associated with each of the mixed uses.
Sure. I guess I wasn't clear. So like the mixed use 25 has an FAR of 1.0.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And in urban industrial, I guess urban industrial residential, right, it would be the same. And in urban industrial, it's the same as a Am I
You're
that
right.
correctly?
Yes,
Okay.
and so what I'd want your direction on also, if you would like to see urban industrial here, is with or without the residential component. So theme 3 reflects the solid dark purple in the center. That reflects just the single use, the urban industrial use with no residential component, versus the urban industrial residential, which would allow up to 25
So it
units
has
an
the
acre.
residential on top, urban industrial on the bottom, right? And so
In the, whatever configuration the market would propose in this area.
I'd probably beg to differ with Mayor Pro Tem just a little bit. I mean, I view these as basically being giant parking lots. So there's not a lot of structures on the property. If, we just kind of drove by them today. One of them has some like temporary structures, which I would assume is allowed. So, but I don't see a lot of significant improvements. There's just pavement that's probably 20 years old or more, in that area. And so, I think that changing some use there could be of interest. The fact that most of the GPAC picked this, the ones that didn't pick nothing, is that right? There were more than 9 in the room, but some
There were more than 9 in the room, yes.
decided that, maybe they didn't have enough information about this particular area. I mean, I don't know why.
For a variety of reasons, yes, there were more.
So, I appreciate the comment nonetheless. I think that entryway is going to be, an important one, and how do we incentivize those property owners to do something there? And we've joked with some of the staff about potential civic uses on some of the property there that isn't currently for sale, but we'd love for it to be for sale, but that probably wouldn't necessarily fit some of the design ideas that we have here. I'd say probably my bigger concern, and I'm just wondering if there was any specific feedback, is the area. I don't know how to explain it. I just say it's toward the right corner of the page on the other side of Lake Forest Drive,
Sure, on
going
the-
towards El Toro.
kind of the
Yeah,
east
so
side
it's some of that's done well. For instance, anecdotally, I've heard that the hotel there stays fairly busy, the Prominence Hotel. I don't know specifically, but that's what I've heard. Okay, great. But some of the other parts of those centers had some real struggles, and so is there? Did the GPAC have any specific discussions about those particular parcels, and do they have any particular comments that you could share?
They felt similarly that there was mixed success in that area. Some of them had an experience more, with going to the Starbucks there, whatever. Apparently, it's doing also very well. What they found was that it was just it was really varied. There were some businesses that were doing well, and there was an office development there that's never been occupied. So they've found this as a challenging area. So again, finding an opportunity to expand the range of options available, they thought could be a catalyst to allow for reinvestment and revitalization of some of those uses, so that those that aren't successful or not appropriate, maybe they'd have a choice to introduce a new complementary use, and in particular, looking at a mixed-use designation to allow for the introduction of residential might help some of your current businesses do better, and for those that aren't really succeeding, be able to have another choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough strip of land because it's not very wide. There's not a whole lot that you can do with it without getting really, really creative with parking and things like that. I think specifically of the hookah lounge that's there. Or I think it's gone now, but I don't know for sure. But I know that's had some law enforcement challenges at times, and how do we bring in the right kind of tenant there, whether it's retail, residential, office space, whatever. So, that's the area that I was most concerned about. But in the end, they had a conversation. They felt like those that wanted to participate felt like this Theme 5 is the one that would actually make the most sense. Is that?
They did. Now, with that said, as provided in your notes summarizing this area, this was an area that your GPAC struggled most with because they were least familiar with it. This was an area that, in their everyday life, they experienced the least out of those 5 focus areas. So, with that said, they did coalesce around the Theme 5 alternative. Again, the key takeaways they provided us were that they felt that this was a good location for new housing. They wanted to see something different as the window to your new civic center, and they'd like to see expanded choices to redevelop those underperforming parcels along Lake Forest Drive. They eventually coalesced around the mixed-use 25 designation in both locations, and that's kind of was their feedback. But it was a challenging location for them to kind of visualize what it might look like.
I have the exact same challenge, and I because of that, it's difficult for me to pick a theme here. I think that I would really like us to probably, I don't want to slow down the process in any way, but I'd really like to see us engage with some particular property owners here, because I think that this is going to be really owner-specific, I guess. Again, that's excluding the ability to talk to someone who might want to invest in buying multiple parcels. We're limiting ourselves only with the people who actually own the property at this point. But I just feel like if the GPAC didn't have a lot of knowledge about the area, they just feel like they have to make a pick because we're putting one in front of them. And so we get them all to coalesce around one idea, but I don't feel very strongly about it. So,
in a
that's where I'm at a loss.
surprising turn of events, this was a theme 5, meaning that they defined the theme and all of them voted for it. So it was an unusual conversation, but it was the only theme that they did coalesce around unanimously. With that said, we will continue to engage our property owners. We have contacts with retail brokers, commercial real estate brokers here. Their insights are represented as part of the GPAC because of the direction that you provided us in terms of its composition. So we do have input from the real estate community and from developers in this group, and that was the theme that they did feel represented their long-term vision here.
Okay. I can appreciate the urban industrial comment that the Mayor Pro Tem added. I struggle with this particular area, so I'm pretty flexible in all this, but at the same time, I just don't have enough information that I'm not going to lead on it, that's for sure.
I actually, ARB, who's in the process of building our civic centers, buildings included on the corner of that, right there in that section. Right above that is Diecast, which runs a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week manufacturing plant right there. So then the auto center, the auto repair shops that are on their side of the opening there, the other side of the creek, with us possibly rezoning and limiting the ability for some of those shops at the light industrial area, that's going to be our auto hub, really, because all the auto dealerships, the muffler shops, and the oil change, the trailers, they're all right there. And we're losing the light industrial area, which is a lot of our mom and pop auto shops. So, I really don't know what to do with this area, neither. I understand some on council, some on city staff want to try to beautify our drive to the Civic Center, but we should have thought about that before, because some of those businesses along there are successful. ARB, I don't think, it's a Texas company, but in fact, this is their California headquarters. Diecast is a worldwide company, and that's right there, and they run 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And I think that this might even include where do we have your Meet the Mayor? Intertech? That's right there too.
It's on Commerce Center here, but it kind of falls into this broad category. But
well, might I suggest one of the things you could consider if I'm understanding where some of this feedback is going. So again, as we clarified, the urban industrial residential category allows densities up to 25, just like the MU 25 does. So the GPAC's intent was really to provide a direction at that density level. That's why they applied the MU 25 across the board. You could consider, if this is your direction, to consider one or both of these kind of discrete focus areas as the urban industrial residential, so that you could continue to support some of your more industrial uses and allow for the residential cohabitating in that area that the GPAC was gravitating
I'll second
towards.
that motion.
It's not a motion for me. That is absolutely your just something for your consideration if that's more reflective of your preference.
Ms. Tropiano, I do like that idea, because the struggle is, yes, I don't think we disagree with the density of being at 25, but where we disagree is this might completely change the dynamic of that area, and having those what we call light industrial uses are really good in the city, and if we want to reduce trips and all these kinds of things where we want people to live, work, and play in Lake Forest, I think it would behoove us to steer away from just having 100% residential on all this stuff. So, and again, that seems to be a recurring theme with me, but I just want us to be cognizant of, like, what we say now, things change in 5-10 years very quickly. The big box stores, who knows what's going to happen with that. But I would like to see a little something of the urban industrial residential in the theme 5. And my other question is, do you ever do three? I think you did it on the first theme, but do you ever do three uses in a theme area? I think you did it on the
Yes,
first one.
you can configure them in any number. You could use all 25 of them if you want.
Mix and
You could-
match.
Yes, you can mix and match them to
Don't
the
tell
extent
me
you
that.
want.
No, but I.
So yes, you can choose and provide that direction for our communication, since I'm standing back here and you're sitting up there. If we wanted to talk about kind of the area, the core area that's to the west of the trail versus the area to the east of the trail that's happening between the trail and Lake Forest Drive.
Right.
So let me throw something out there. I'm good with theme 5. The part I think would be intriguing is along the creek. This is going to be hard to describe. Let's see, I'm on the north side of the creek that is currently, it's the light purple, suggesting the urban industrial residential there. And I don't know if it helps for me to go to that map up there.
I could come to you, you could
Well,
come
no,
here,
I mean, I'm trying to
whichever
explain
one
it
is
to my
best.
colleagues.
Yeah.
I'll go over here and see if I can, we'll try this. We were to take this piece here, so sort of bisecting this whole piece here and making this piece in here.
We know the street.
That's where the auto dealers or auto repair shops are. Is that what you're considering, Mr. Mayor? The auto repair shops?
I hear from your staff that that's Panasonic.
Okay.
See, I don't think it'll be useful to change the zoning there for Panasonic. I mean, they're a long-term tenant.
I don't think.
But they're not being driven out by this plan. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. This
No,
is not.
you're
This is
absolutely
not
right.
a go away Panasonic. None of this. That's not the intent of any of this.
True.
Because you're sending that message to everyone. You change the underlying thing. You're basically, so what are we telling them? We don't want you here. No, that's
True.
I'm trying to leave some space that I think there's some interest in 5. I'm trying to honor the idea of little urban industrial residential to bring a different notion into there. I'm fine with 5 the way it is, but I'm willing to entertain the urban industrial residential in the area identified, partly because it's along the creek, and I just, to my eye, I think the light industrial next to a creek, doesn't suit my eye. That's me.
Well, what we'd like to propose is that we move forward with your feedback on this with the understanding that there would be a discrete area identified for the urban industrial residential. Again, it would not change the number of units, square footage identified below, because as was pointed out, it is a consistent assumption in terms of the maximum density in FAR. It's really more of working in the nuanced narrative that would change the direction from the mixed use in the more traditional commercial retail format to allow for those more urban industrial uses. When it comes down to the specific kind of parcel configuration, we want to make sure that we get with staff, make sure we understand all of those land use patterns and constraints and opportunities and find the right spot to apply that.
That's my motion.
Okay, second that.
So for our preference, so our reference is to move forward with the theme 5 with the understanding that a discrete area will be identified for the urban industrial residential in the spirit of those numbers presented as part of this summary report.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Call for the vote.
Please vote.
Motion approved 4-1 with Councilmember Basil dissenting.
Okay, on to Foothill Ranch. I can officially say we're halfway. More than halfway.
More than.
More than halfway. Foothill Ranch, Town Center.
Yes, again, so one of your major shopping centers and retail sales tax revenue generators, an area that a lot of your residents, as opposed to the previous focus area, this area is quite the opposite. Everyone's generally very familiar with it. Your current business as usual scenario for the Foothill Ranch Town Center is reflected as a pure commercial designation on all different quadrants and parts of the center. Theme 2 looked at taking a similar tiered mixed-use approach. So just as we discussed in El Toro, looking at an opportunity to identify multiple levels of mixed-use designation, creating kind of a core of the most intense and dense use, so mixed-use 60 in the middle, closest to the freeway, and then stepping out to the lower levels of mixed use as you work your way to the edges of the focus area. So again, the three kind of color gradients, the darkest red being mixed use 60, the medium red being mixed use 43, and the light pink being mixed use 25. Theme 3 envisioned this area as a major employment center through the designation of the mixed-use office designation. So the impetus behind development of this theme alternative was that if the city did want to emphasize office development and growth and have a major center dedicated to marquee Class A, multi-story office space, maybe this would be an area that you could start to develop that sort of synergy and use. So looking at designating that area for the mixed-use office. Theme 4, mixed growth, was applying the standard of mixed use 25 across all components of the focus area. That theme 4, mixed growth, was the majority preference, 9 preferred votes for that area from the GPAC, with the specific nuanced direction for you that they would like to also see an urban industrial residential component as part of that definition, just as your direction in the Civic Center reflected that same preference. So they directed staff and the consultant team to find the right location for that, but that they would like to see that integrated into the vision for this area. So again, the preference of the GPAC was 9 preferred votes for the theme 4, with the assumption that there would be a narrative or description allowing for some of those more creative brewery style, good neighbor manufacturing type of artisanal uses. And then we did have 2 preferences for the expanded housing choices option, theme 2, drawn to the idea that if there would be somewhere in the community to accommodate these types of residential projects, this might be a desirable spot for that.
Colleagues.
I just have a question, and this is not specific to what we're doing. I mean, it is, but not really. Okay, Ms. Tropiano, are you familiar with the Silos project that was redeveloped in Waco, Texas by the Chip and Joanna Gaines? They did a really nice job there.
I've seen photos because I'm a big fan of.
So there's a big park.
Big fan of them, but
yeah, they did a good job. There's a park in the middle where kids and families can gather. It takes a great use of ample sunlight. It's like a gathering place for city residents. And then around it is the use of retail, residential. I'm sorry, just retail, really, and cafes. And it has a really nice walkability feel. Again, it takes advantage of open space, walkability, and also, they have little food trucks that are, they're not movable, but they're there all the time, consistent. So my question is, that's a nice vision because it's a center of activity for families, which I think it's just not there right now. That food court's kind of dead and dark. Does it take advantage of natural light? So which one of these themes kind of would allow us to amplify that area in that way?
Well, certainly as was discussed earlier, providing the carrot on the market incentive side to come in and propose those types of vibrant projects with great amenities and wonderful architecture and, requiring kind of that higher level of development. You're going to generate the biggest bang for your buck by allowing the maximum density or an intensity to allow the market to coalesce around what they feel is appropriate here. So an MU60 or an MU43 is reflective of that type of development. As you pointed out earlier, the MU25 is more of a horizontal configuration at much more traditional lower densities, many of which are reflected in a lot of your current residential projects. So if you'd like to see, as Gail mentioned, a replication of the type of development that, what was it called at 25, to use an acre?
I think it's Avalon.
The Avalon. So it's something kind of around the Avalon density. If you feel like that would be an appropriate integration here to complement those uses, that would be reflected more in the 25 density level. But the MU25, that's more of your horizontal configuration, surface parking, as we've discussed, kind of the project design components that go along with that type of designation.
Now, this particular area, I'm sorry, were you?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Now, traffic and parking is always a big concern. And, we have a new development up in that area that's got some, it's just not attractive with all the cars parked on the peripheral streets. So if we were looking at doing a mixed use for this area, I think the most effective way to do it would be to have it as a occupancy level where we can have an underground parking element, something to get the resident parking out of the retail space. That way it's more seamless. It doesn't interfere with the enjoyment of the people coming to enjoy the facilities, the amenities, and the residents will have their designated parking, and it won't become a blight. Because that's always a big concern, that there are just too many cars everywhere. So I'm not sure which density would allow for like an underground parking component. Is it the 43?
I would say the most dense that you are comfortable going, the most likely you would be able to find a project that could accommodate that type of development. So we typically hear from our development community, including those working in Lake Forest, that somewhere around a 50 DUs an acre is really where you start to see a transformation in their ability to provide more creative parking solutions, whether it's underground or structured, a wrapped project like we talked about. So that seems to be where the market is right now, is somewhere in that range, give or take. So we definitely be looking to achieve that vision at mixed use 43 or mixed use 60. You won't get a structured or underground parking at any densities lower than that.
Okay. That's kind of the feel I've gotten from the residents, kind of polling people what they're thinking, is it's the least amount of impact to the parking situation and there being the conflict with the additional traffic and finding a place to park. It's really annoying. So I guess I would support a higher density in that case of like a mixed use 43 or something, or where if we can incorporate a brewery, then it would be the urban use.
Are you making that into a motion? Because I think that's where our Walmart is, Target, and we've got some high retail there. But the fact is, to me, there's large parking lots. I think that if we can incentivize allowing some pads to be built with some townhouses or apartments up in that area, but I think we'd have to up the MU to 43 or above to allow that to be underground parking, to where we can have that kind of, maybe some affordable pads up there, to where we can have that for workforce housing, where we have Target, Walmart, Hobby Lobby. So I would make a motion that maybe we up the MU to 43 on theme 4 for mixed use. Kind of maybe give us the widest variety. And you think 43 might incentivize the property, or we could even go 60 just for purposes of traffic studies, since we have one bite at the apple with that. So, and we can always bring down.
Now, also to that amendment, because we talked about like microbrewery and things like that, would that be an urban industrial?
We're appreciating the nuances in the way we describe the uses. I do not envision that we would preclude the inclusion of a vibrant, wonderful brewery-style atmosphere as part of a mixed-use designation. Those are not exclusive.
Okay.
So I think the idea was the urban industrial designation was allowing for maybe more robust light manufacturing or production, still being good neighbors, but that would really be the emphasis. Those types of desirable uses could certainly still be accommodated in your mixed-use areas, and we'd certainly want to see that as part of that vibrant activity.
What I'm thinking about doing is just trying to complement what we already have there. We have a very successful business building which houses the Loan Depot. We've got the food court and the movie theater, which is people from Santa Margarita, Mission Viejo come to our city to go to the movies. So Regal's not going anywhere. So the fact is, I'm just trying something that we can to supplement that with those large parking lots, and some of the surrounding businesses maybe that aren't doing so well have some option for some of the property owners. So if you want to make a suggestion to us, because I think that some of the buildings we're not going nowhere with it. So I think that upping the MU to 43.
I'll support that, MU 43. I'll second that.
So is 43 going to get the wraparound parking.
43, the wraparound parking is a challenge.
Okay, 6.
So, well, and I'm not trying to drive it up. I'm just
reflecting. I can hear some.
I want to open up the options.
I was going to say, if the developers are in the back, they're going to start groaning in my ear if I don't accurately represent where the market is going. We're, a maximum density of 43 will not guarantee you the ability to pencil a wrap project. I think up to 60 is what they are looking for as being a market-driven opportunity to create that type of environment. Now, to your point about creating a synergy, a mix of uses, MU43 is certainly going to get you closer, but if you're talking about product, the actual type of development, the feedback we've gotten very specifically is that that type of development would happen at densities between 50 and 60.
And I think to address your parking concerns, that's where you'd have to get. In the EIR, what you're going to be looking at is the traffic impact along Bake, Portola, and Alton. And that's obviously going to be a concern for all of us. But you'll address the parking issue if you at least analyze the density at a higher level of the 50 or 60. So I just want to make sure that we don't get partially there, it doesn't accomplish what you want, and we're not really studying what we need to. So.
That makes sense.
Okay, so I
Is that a
think...
friendly amendment?
It's, well,
You just changed it, so I'll let you make it.
All right, so I'd make the motion that we go to, I think Theme 2 has MU60 in a portion of it, right?
It does. It includes all 3 levels of mixed use, just in a specific configuration.
I think that that's the direction that I would go. I wouldn't want to see the entire area looked at from an MU60 perspective. I just think a section of it. I don't know if that particular section is the right one or not, based on what the property owners think, but I would just say a section. So as you're studying it, I don't know how fungible these actual little squares are here in Theme 2, but...
Yes, it's quite flexible once we, look at the analysis within that focus area. To the extent that it's applied on a parcel-specific basis, we could continue to refine that. Our goal in analyzing the benchmark plan is to create that envelope that we study. So Theme 2 reflects kind of a mix of those different uses, as opposed to applying a standard mixed-use designation across all parcels within the focus area.
So my motion would be to go with Theme 2.
I'll second that.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second for Theme 2 expanded housing options. Any more discussion? Go ahead and vote on that.
Motion approved, 4-1, with Mayor Teddemer dissenting.
Light industrial, rail corridor.
Number 5, we're here. All right, so we're on our 5th and final focus area. This area is referred to as the light industrial or rail corridor focus area. This is just north of where the boundary for the previous El Toro focus area ended. So we're really looking kind of in the area north of the rail line, between the rail line and Geronimo. This area is developed currently with a mixture of light industrial uses and has been one of the oldest areas of your city and has been operating largely in the fashion it is today for the past 60 or 70 years. This area has a number of individual parcels and property owners here, but continues to be located along one of your major corridors and is surrounded by other types of amenable uses, such as your golf facility to the east and other residential uses on the opposite sides. So Theme 2 looked at expanded housing choices. This reflected a density of 15 to 25, your medium density residential across the focus area. Theme 3 looked at expanded employment choices, so identifying a portion of the focus area to make that transition to medium density residential in the area closest to the golf facility, allowing the parcels located adjacent to El Toro and those in the middle of the focus area to move to a more dense or intense non-residential use. So it's the single dark purple color. It's just for urban industrial. Theme 4 looked at mixed growth, which was looking at urban, industrial, residential in that area. So again, the nuanced difference between 3 and 4 being whether or not residential is part of the equation on those areas adjacent to El Toro Road. And then Theme 5, which the GPAC recommended that you consider, after much discussion in this area, they coalesced around the idea that they would like to see something different here. And they were concerned that the original themes explored were not sufficient enough to create the change that they would like to see. So they asked that Theme 5 be considered. This is MU43 across the entire area. They felt that that was a reflection of the type of land use designation that would start to motivate and create the catalyst for change here. So that received the highest number of preference votes. Theme 5 received 8 votes, and then all of the others besides the business as usual received 1 each. Again, the reason behind that was really that the GPAC felt that none of the original proposals would create that change that they wanted to see here.
Thank you. Colleagues?
Start with some questions for staff. So how many acres are we talking about in this particular area? Do we have any idea?
27.
27. Okay. First, I know that it's the area that's referred to as light industrial. I think the impact on the smaller parcel is on the opposite side of the railroad track from the rest of it. It's such a tough spot. I mean, the access to that particular area is incredibly challenging. I think that it's an area. I think there's an auto wrecking yard or something like that over there. I'm not exactly sure, but like a junkyard basically. There's one veterinarian center. I think there's one parcel that's undeveloped, a tiny one. I just don't know that I necessarily think about that the same way I think about the other side, just because of all the access issues in there. Secondly, this particular area is right adjacent to where we've been having some of the biggest discussions about parking impacts and parking permits and things of that nature. And I don't like the higher density, but I'm really concerned by your comment about the fact that if we don't hit a certain level, then we're not going to have vertical parking or underground parking or whatever it might be. And I think that this whole area just starts to get a little bit more challenging. The last thing we want to do is take a bad parking situation and make it worse. So I would rather analyze again. I'm really torn because as I mentioned at the beginning, I don't want to support a bunch of MU60. If I were up here, I probably wouldn't be voting for the projects. But at the same time, that's my real concern is how do we deal with those parking situations? And, going to an MU33 and not dealing with it, it's kind of like, okay, what's it going to take to get the area redeveloped and yet not cause a major parking issue again? And I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to picture right now what would be an MU43 with surface parking around it, and do they still get, does it still, the economics pencil out for them to do that? Because I'm thinking that, maybe excluding that one parcel, it's 25 acres or something. Maybe the building space is on 5 acres, and the rest of it has to be surface park. I don't know how to visualize it, so I'm just kind of speculating in my own mind. But that's my big challenge for that particular section. And we know that we have tons and tons of parking issues around there. We know that we have tons and tons of property owners as well, little parcels here and there. I think there's actually like an old house somewhere in this property somewhere that somebody lives in, right? And it's non-conforming, because it was probably built in 1962 or something like that. And so, it's what did they talk about in the GPAC? How much of this did they discuss? And because obviously they went a completely different route than some of the discussions. So
Yeah,
maybe just elaborate a little bit more on some of the specifics.
Sure. I mean, they ultimately felt that the market was going to be most motivated to come into this area and see some change that the community hasn't seen for 70 years by creating an opportunity to go to a density at 43 they felt was the right choice, kind of balancing the need to create some incentive for some market change without going to the MU60. They did talk about it. They didn't pursue that as their alternative recommendation for you for some of the same concerns that you brought up. And in particular, every individual project area is going to be unique, and it's going to necessitate its own pencil, right? What's it going to cost to buy the land, tear down whatever is there, redevelop it, et cetera. So on our previous discussion in Foothill Ranch Town Center, looking at a prime commercial pad and the economics that are going into it, the feedback we're getting is that the density at the MU60 or MU50 is really what you need to get the type of parking you want. This area is different. It has different underlying land uses. It has different, land values than those areas. And so I think you might have a better opportunity at achieving some of those same goals at a lower density in this area versus what you might see in Foothill Ranch Town Center. So it's not universal application in every unique situation. So ultimately the GPAC felt, based on their experience and what they've been hearing from our market advisors and their due diligence, that MU43, they would like to see that as the catalyst for change here.
Okay. Another question for staff. So, roughly 1/5, 1/6 of this property is currently a piece of dirt that a project has been approved for. It's had weeds growing, it's had weeds cut, it's had weeds growing again, it's got, a fence around it. I've asked a few times, and staff's been very diligent in getting responses to me. My understanding is that their timeline is starting to run out to present us a project. Are we anywhere close to that, or are they just feeling like, hey, market conditions and what's been approved isn't something that would work for them? I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot, but...
No, they've turned in a complete set of construction drawings that have gone through the plan check process. So they've been active on the project since the time the entitlement, but the next thing that they need is to have a building permit issued. That would give them the ability to extend their time frames once the building permit is issued.
And are we getting close to that time frame? The last time I heard, I thought we were. I thought it was a deadline this year.
We've been in contact with them. They have a local architect that we've worked with. They seem to have a corporate structure, but the permit is ready to be issued, and I think the impetus for them may come because the codes will change in January of next year. So they've completely designed a project with the current code cycle in mind, so they would need to pull that permit sometime in the near future.
Okay. All right. Again, I think it's a tough area, so seems like there was a lot of coalescing around Theme 5, so I could support that at this point for for further study. So
support
Mr. Mayor.
Theme 5.
Theme 5.
Okay, thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
A question to staff. Gunal Lumber, is that a $10 million annual boost to our economy, or is the alley building material? What are the tax revenue of those two?
Well, I can't tell you what the tax revenue is, or
I'm
else
just throwing out ideas. I mean, that's
the
substantial.
State Board of Equalization might come down here and take me away.
It's substantial, is it not?
It's probably an average business in the city. Not at your higher end, not at your lower end. Does that put you in the middle?
It's very ubiquitous. Good job.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Hold on, I just want to make sure. Councilmember Voigt, you got what you needed? Okay.
There's nothing else. I have no follow-up.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hi. So initially when I read through this particular theme, what attracted me the most was theme 2, and the reason being it includes workforce housing. So middle-class employees, teachers, nurses, these kinds of folks that, do the day-in, day-out work that we so support in our daily lives. So does Theme 5, which is the one that the GPAC group prefers, does that also support workforce housing as well?
Yes, absolutely. So as we discussed before, it's not exactly a perfect science, but evidence has shown that as you increase the allowable density, you have the ability to generate more attainable and affordable housing.
Yeah.
So that is at a density that is actually higher than those described in Theme 2. So presumably,
Oh, right, okay.
it would be an increase in that allowable density. So yes, absolutely.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be that high, but it can be if we went with Theme 5, and it could provide affordable housing for people that want to live in Lake Forest.
That's right.
Young professionals and that. Okay. So if that's the case, I would be okay. So I was originally drawn to Theme 2 because of the workforce housing element, but I could also support Theme 5 as well.
Okay.
This area gave me a ulcer because it's just such a difficult area, and I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, 20 years down the road, and our population is going to grow from 85,000 to 120, 130,000, and I'm looking at this area, and I'm thinking railroad tracks. Can we make a hub out of it? So that will completely change the entire thing. So I don't know what to do because obviously OCTA doesn't have any current plans to put, a railway hub through here. But if they did, imagine what we could do with this area. So hence the ulcer. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts about that, or if, maybe we open a conversation with OCTA to see if there's a possibility in the future to consider this as a hub, given we're going to be expanding our population by 50%. That may be something that could happen down the road. I don't know what anyone else thinks about it.
In my previous tour of duty, I think this was looked at when we tried to look at the light industrial area and some alternatives. I believe that conversation was broached, and my recollection, but can be revisited, is that OCTA did not want to do that. It's expensive to build those. It causes train travel challenges and everything else when you have a lot of stops. My son lives in San Luis Obispo. It's a 7-hour trip because of all the stops. And I get the sense they didn't have a lot of interest. Maybe that's changed, but I don't think there was a lot of interest by the train people to Metrolink or Amtrak or anybody else to do that. That's my recollection, maybe.
Yeah, I think
City
that's
manager.
my recollection as well.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
What was the population during that discussion?
78,000.
70.
Yeah.
And it's not that I understand your sentiment around it, because it'd be a pretty neat place to develop and have some fun with in terms of ideas, except there didn't seem to be a lot of interest by the folks that would be responsible for that. Putting it there, they didn't seem to have a lot of interest. But it could be re-explored if that's something we want to do.
Well, certainly as part of our mobility element on the policy side of things, we are looking to expand multimodal connections to the region, whether it's through walking, biking, transit, and others. So we could absolutely envision a policy or action to continue that conversation with OCTA, especially as the community grows, and periodically evaluate the opportunity to expand service here.
I would like to have that be an open consideration if the rest of the council would be amenable to it.
To exploring.
To just keep the conversation open with OCTA to
Sure.
see if they would.
That's just on the policy side of things, and as the community develops.
And I support that. I mean, is there a land use that you're interested in that would accommodate that?
Well, that area, if it were to be converted into a railway hub, then I think it would be a really cool, urban. I mean, this is where you're going to do something really urban and funky. So if it became a hub, yes, but if it's not, then high density mixed use. I'm not in love with really any of the choices.
So, question to follow on that: would the mixed growth, these colors, I'm sorry, under theme 4? What are we looking at? Is that mixed-use office or urban industrial?
That would be urban industrial, and so again, that density would be up to a 25 DUs an acre as part of that. So the difference between that and theme 2 is just basically is it exclusively residential, or does it allow for a mix of uses, both residential and urban industrial? So, it sounds like we haven't heard any feedback from anyone to go higher than what the GPAC considered. So if I'm understanding everyone correctly, no one wants to consider the mixed-use 60. So what we're really talking about is the difference between the GPAC's preference, which was applying that MU 43, versus however you want to slice or dice it, a configuration that looks at a density of around 25. So I think that that's kind of the direction that those are kind of the two choices on the table, and then the nuance of whether it does include urban residential or urban industrial versus commercial, we can fine-tune, but it's really more about the density level, if you're preferring the cap at 43 or if you're preferring the cap at 25.
I mean, I'm intrigued by theme 4, which has the urban industrial residential component, which would also, I think, work toward what I think you're going for,
Yeah.
or at least as an idea. So I'm more in favor of theme 4, personally. So
But then that begs the question, the parking issue that you brought up.
Yeah, that's my main concern there. I look at it from a structure perspective, and like for instance, the one piece of land that's about to be redeveloped. I mean, they needed to tear down. They're going to have to grade, and then they're going to have to build from the ground up. I think this area is probably fairly conducive to doing that. Some of those buildings are pretty old. I think the auto mechanic buildings are a little bit newer, but the ones that, I mean, Ganal and Valley Building Materials are fairly open with kind of steel structure, shed, barn kind of things. So they don't have as many buildings on them. So they're kind of starting out as a base piece of land. So I know you gave us early on the $3 million to $3.5 million an acre, and that's kind of Lake Forest in general. And I'm guessing in particular parts of town and elevations and views and things like that, it has a higher value than others. And so I could see there being some interest there potentially in that urban industrial 25 unit or MU 25 number. But again, I'm really concerned about the parking, and that we just have some overflow outside of that. And you just look at all the areas around it, and it's ripe for that. It's ripe for having more residents and more vehicles than would probably the MU25 would typically suggest. Whereas other parts of town, it's difficult to spill over just because of the way it is, the location that they're in, right? So, and that's our same concern, like for instance, in Foothill Town Center, is, we don't want it to spill into the retail parking lots. And in fact, if I read some of the comments, it was kind of the opposite, where there might be some retail parking that would be available within the residential structures, is what some of the GPAC were talking about. So, I agree. I think that urban industrial concept kind of works. I just don't know that the MU25 is going to work. So if there was like an urban industrial 43,
That's what I was thinking. I was
right?
saying,
I mean,
can we make it urban industrial?
We're working on the fly here, guys. So what I'm hearing is that you want the uses that are more employment dense, with kind of that nuanced focus on industrial uses or creative space, but you want to look at a maximum density that allows up to 43. We can take that direction and reflect that.
Yeah,
we'll find the right way to do it, but I just need that specific direction, and then I'll find the right way to.
I think that's where we can all come to some agreement. Now, the reality is when the project comes before us, I mean, when we were talking about heights of just the U-Haul facility itself, we started getting tons and tons of feedback from the surrounding neighborhoods. So, I mean, we're going to have to be cognizant of the reality of the vote we're taking, but what we're studying today and what could potentially pencil out, and then what may become reality are going to be two different things. But I think there's some value in doing that. Urban industrial MU43 is kind of how I would gauge it. So I guess if there's a little bit of interest, I'll make a motion that that's what we consider.
I'll second that. You read my thoughts.
And I appreciate the conversation around parking. I'm also equally concerned about the number of people that are going to be there and how that contributes to other mobility issues. So that's the tension that I see, is parking is an issue, but we also have people that are going to take those cars and start driving around, a lot more of them, and that's why I generally have concern about a lot of upward pressure on the density side. So that's the tension that I'm at. So I'm hearing a motion and a second for theme 5 with an urban industrial 43.
Yes, with the intent of allowing for, expanded quality, good neighbor, urban industrial type uses at a maximum density of 43 and figuring out the right way to marry those two.
Okay. We have a motion and a second, but is there any other thoughts? Deep in thought.
Just to reassure you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think any of us want to add to a traffic burden and make Lake Forest like Irvine. So I just want you to say that I've supported these. So in the process of going forward and looking at the numbers and seeing what is available, I think that it gives us the most option.
Well, I agree with that, but I also don't want to telegraph to the world that we're open for business on something that we really aren't, because I don't think that serves a narrative either. Presumably, builders and other planners are going to look at this and say, "Oh, they're open for a conversation about 43." And
there again, if we have one of our areas has one unit or one section or one corner that has a higher density that has underground parking, I think that still allows us to get something of what we want, but we can't. We don't have to do the whole area in that. So,
of course,
yeah.
But to the mayor's point, I think you could do that in the theme 5 the way it is, MU43, because it is such a small total parcel acreage that the developer would have to think of adequate parking, and that's something that the onus is on the developer to develop a parking plan that matches our municipal code. So I mean, there wouldn't be anything in that theme that would go against code. For instance, yes, I'm aware that we have parking issues now, and they may or may not be up to code, but I mean, let's put the onus on the developer to do that.
And the advantage we have right now, housing is, people are not really buying property for housing right now. I think that the housing boom has gone kind of tapering down to where now people are looking at businesses again, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second, so I want to be calling for the vote here. For theme 5, mixed use, theme 5, urban industrial 43-ish.
Yes. As long as I've reiterated that back to you and confirmed that that's the direction you're going.
Sorry, before I vote, in that particular instance, is there workforce housing?
Yes, again, at levels, at these expected density maximums, you would be supporting workforce housing and attainable housing. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Please vote.
Motion approved 3-2 with Mayor Teddimer dissenting and Councilmember Voigt's abstaining.
Okay. Thank you all for your patience and good work. Is there anything else on this we need to take care of? Okay. We're going to go to the city manager's report.
Mayor and the members of the council, I received an email shortly before our meeting today from our economic development manager who shared that At Home, the new home decor store at the Foothill Ranch Town Center, is now open for business. So we'll have more information for you on their actual grand opening, but they are open as of today.
Thank you. Councilmember Basil?
I know what I'm doing this weekend. Everyone have a great evening.
Councilmember Robinson?
No comments this evening, thanks.
Councilmember Voigts?
I attended our Lake Forest Pet Expo. Great turnout. More people adopting animals out of there than I've ever seen. So I know that in the weeks coming up to that, I talked to 4 or 5 people that were saying that they were going there specifically to look to adopt an animal. So I just want to say it was a beautiful weather. Thank you, staff. And Saturdays are for soccer. Sunday can be for the Pet Expo next year. But so thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
just wanted to say Happy Nowruz to my Iranian American constituents here in Lake Forest. The second thing is I went and attended a ribbon cutting last week for Dr. Pirose and Dr. Vaughn, a pediatric and also a regular dentist, and happy to support them in their business here in Lake Forest.
Thank you. Attended the Saddleback Valley Unified School District Facilities Master Plan meeting.
I was there too.
Yes, you were. Anyway, it was just interesting to hear about where they are in that process. I was not there to provide input, just more to gain information about what they're contemplating. Attended a ribbon cutting for Teriyaki Madness. Was also at the South County Pet Expo. Great turnout, so thank you to staff for a great event. Thank you, all one and all. And I went to a chamber mixer. And I stopped by a community choice energy workshop that was in the city of Irvine, just to continue to absorb as much information as I can. So with that, we are adjourned.